Recording in progress.
So it was because of, we have to complete all the sessions by third. So what we planned was in the 10 webinars, which you might have seen in the list, we covered basically all aspects of other advanced diagnostics, therapeutics, holistic, multidisciplinary management. We have had panel on, new drug options, multidisciplinary, then also talking about breaking the bad news and transitional palliative care, ethics, because many things are there, even in the generic counseling part coming with ethics also because of that X-linked one. And also when the drugs are available and it's out of financial reach, that also is another ethical issue. Destigmatization, very important. And humanistic aspect. And then we had a panel of need for research, which we had all the agencies in India who are funding the research and trying to talk about how research is important so that indigenous molecules and all are also produced so as to be cost effective part. Then we also had a panel with the government of India talking about the rare disease policy. And then we had a talk from Shamika Ravi. She's working a lot of with the economic aspects. And then it was on the, what are the how to deal with the prohibitive cost and where we stand with medical insurance with such prohibitive things. And then we had a panel of parent support group day before yesterday. So today what we are planning is what we expect from this panel is what is the role of pharma industries. And I have requested all the, 4 big pharmas who are actually handling neuromuscular disorders as of now are on board. And then after this we have the role of print, various kinds of media, both the radio, the TV, the print, the social media, and how to help. And then we have NGOs specifically for SMA, Indian and global on Monday, and then DMD. Then we also have one on global scenario. So many of you will be also participating, or the company will be anyway participating for global scenarios. And we have clinicians also from across the world. We have somebody from Malaysia, somebody from different parts of the world. We are trying to have and see how they are handling. Then there is something, parents are going haywire for the crowdfunding. We have one on crowdfunding, then on humanitarian access programs and the employee schemes. And we end up with the coping strategies for parents, because that is very important for them to be empowered. So that is how we plan. All the things are being recorded and they are being live streamed on YouTube and will be available on our website as well as on Global Genes website. And we plan to take out certain resource materials also. And I think all what we discuss now will help us guide, and it may these documents if which we'll prepare will possibly help help the parents as well as the it may be submitted to the government agencies as well for whatever the discussions are. That's how we plan. Tim, obviously you're going to be speaking in English, but we have been using the medium mixed English and Hindi sometime because we have professionals as well as parents. So you please go and talk in your English, fine. And in between, I may just, after you finish, I may just give a gist in Hindi for the Hindi ones, because there it's pan-India actually, and it's open, and it's also through Facebook and Twitter, it was shared. And it is basically that we have on to, and it will be there on the YouTube for anybody to go ahead and do. So we'll just start off. So before I will request Dr. Kakuli to introduce our esteemed panelists. She'll also introduce the moderator when he joins. We'll welcome him, please.
Thank you, Dr. Shefali, for starting the webinar session. Today we are here in the 11th session of the educational webinars, which is related to all the rare diseases. And we have the first topic which we will be covering today is role of pharma. Dr. Shefali would be facilitating the whole session and all the webinars all through. Today, the moderator for the role of pharma session would be Dr. YK Gupta. As Dr. Shefali has already mentioned, he is busy with the health minister today for some urgent meeting. Dr. Gupta is presently the President of Society of Toxicology India and Dean Indian Society of Rational Pharmacotherapeutics. Presently he is President of AIIMS Bhopal. He is awarded fellow of many prestigious associations. So we'll welcome him once he joins. He has sent us a mail where he regrets not joining in time, but a few things he needs to take care. Today, we have major companies that Dr. Shefali has already pointed out. We have PPD, we have Sarepta, PTC, Novartis, and Roche. So from PPD, which is a global contract research organization, we have Dr. Timothy Miller. He is a neuromuscular neurologist and is the global vice president and therapeutic area head rare diseases and pediatrics, and is also head rare diseases and pediatrics center of excellence and clinical research. He has been involved in diagnostic and family centric discussion within DMD and SMA community and have a strong supporter of many patient advocacy organization, and is a core member of NYU Gene Therapy Medical Ethics Working Group and is US NIH's Bespoke Gene Therapy Consortium. We have PTC Therapeutics. PTC Therapeutics is a US pharmaceutical company focused on developmental of orally administered small molecule drugs and gene therapy. Today we have with us Mr. Nikhil Jairam, is a regional head at PTC Therapeutics and is responsible for Australia and Asia. He has more than 10 years of experience working in rare diseases and has continued to see the landscape evolve in the understanding and management of rare diseases. From Novartis, which is the one of the esteemed company, is into new drug discovery and is continuously improving and extending people's life. They use innovative science and technology to address some of the society's most challenging healthcare issues. Novartis discovers and develops breakthrough treatment and finds new ways to develop them as many people as possible. We have with us Dr. Pankaj Gupta. Dr. Pankaj Gupta is the Chief Scientific Officer at Novartis India. He leads the medical affairs, clinical research, physicians, and medical information team there. Prior to Novartis, he was in the medical leadership team of Pfizer and also has a significant experience in public health administration and clinical practice. Dr. Pankaj holds MBBS and MD degree from Grant Medical College, Mumbai, and Sheth GS Medical College, Mumbai, respectively. He has a fellowship in clinical sciences and has completed his management training in XLRI Jamshedpur. Dr. Gupta is personally passionate about transforming clinical practice for better patient access and outcomes that he strives to achieve through his extensive experience in strategic medical affairs, clinical research, integrated evidence generation, market access, and healthcare system partnership. We have Roche. Roche is represented by Dr. S. Rajan. Roche is a global pioneer in pharmaceutical and diagnostic focused on advancing science to improve people's life. Mr. Rajan is the Chief Communication, Corporate Affairs, and CSR Officer, Roche India. He is also an active member of Government Affairs and Rare Disease Committees at Organization of Pharmaceutical Producers of India and FICCI. He has nearly 20 years of leadership, communication, and external affairs experience in the healthcare sector at organizations such as GE Healthcare, Abbott, and Reddy's. I would now hand over the mic to Dr. Shefali to facilitate the session, and we'll wait for Dr. Y.K. Gupta to join. As soon as he joins, he will start moderating.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kakuri. What I'll do is I will just raise them the questions, and then whoever wants among the panelists can add on, and and you can add subsequently and sequentially because everybody may have different thing to share. Can we have the slide, please? So basically, we understand that with the new drug discovery and development, we have so much role of the pharmaceutical industry. So what is the role of pharmaceutical industry in research on treatment of various neuromuscular disorders? Because we're focusing on DMD and SMA in this situation. तो आज हम लोग फार्मा के इंडस्ट्री के जो मेजर कंपनीज हैं जो ग्लोबली हैं जो न्यूरोमसल डिसऑर्डर्स के लिए डेवलप कर रहे हैं ड्रग्स एंड जीन थेरेपी, वो सारे ऑन बोर्ड में हैं. तो अभी हम उनसे क्वेश्चन पूछ रहे हैं. वी हैव पीपल जो पूरे वर्ल्ड को रिप्रेजेंट कर रहे हैं. So my first question is, what is the role of pharmaceutical industries in research on the treatment of various neuromuscular disorders? Maybe Dr. Timothy can start off because he's been working in that area, and lest others may add on. Yeah.
I'd be happy to do that. I'm sure that many on this panel can talk about this. I think that there is a significant role for the pharmaceutical industry and all of the research and development industry right now that are looking into many of the neuromuscular diseases, I think, that have been therapeutically neglected over the years, or we have not had appropriate technologies or scientific discovery for many of them. Really, I think over the past 15 years or so, we've seen a significant interest in several of the genetic aspects of diseases, and the tools that we're now able to employ, we're starting to see some really significant success. I would just say that over the past few years, I've had the chance to work on probably several hundred programs in neurologic disorders, but quite a few in neuromuscular disorders, 20 to 30 in Duchenne, and several also in spinal muscular atrophy, along with a series of other disorders that I think are now coming to the forefront of our research. And obviously, I think moving the tools that we need to be able to deliver these types of therapies, and also working with the regulatory agencies so that they know what patients are actually experiencing is really critical. And we've seen a big push in that across the industry. And I'm really proud of the fact that many companies are now looking deeply into what are the actual needs of patients and trying to meet them and understand the diseases better. Again, at the end of the day, we say what we are looking to do is to provide transformational therapies, not minimal improvements, but significant across the board.
Thank you, Tim. Anybody else?
Yeah, Dr. Shefali, if I could just maybe build on to what Dr. Tim shared. I think from a pharmaceutical industry's perspective, it starts from our purpose. I think, overall, the intent of trying to do good for patients, I would say the role is extremely critical and I would say central to the entire disease management, especially with respect to, rare diseases. What we kind of fail to understand is that, life of patients who are dealing with, rare conditions, what we consider as normal may actually be either, extremely difficult or impossible for, folks, who are dealing with rare conditions. And that is something that the industry realizes. So, just to state it, imagine this, 5-7 years back, there wasn't a solution available in the world for SMA. And today, given the, emphasis and the focus on neuromuscular, you have 3 options that, patients can bank on. And out of that, even to the extent that there is an oral option, which can significantly improve, patient convenience, compliance, etc. So I would say, impact extremely central, in terms of bringing in breakthrough technologies, because, without a drug, there is no treatment, and without a treatment, there is no hope.
Yeah, that's very well said. Any Nikhil, you want to add?
Yeah, I think, if I break it down, the role of the pharma industry is to take all these concepts that are thought of in a lab and then to bring it to reality. Because without the role of the industry, these remain ideas in a laboratory or in scientific minds. But it's pharmaceutical industry that actually finds a way to invest and bring it to reality. So that's putting in the funding, taking on the risk, taking on the manufacturing responsibilities, and then ensuring it gets to patients in a timely manner as best they can. So I think to echo Rajan's point, it's a crucial part of delivering healthcare because it actually steps in to transform ideas to reality.
Absolutely. Pankaj?
I completely agree with all that my panelists have said. First of all, Dr. Shefali, thanks for having me here for this very important discussion. Just to add on and build on whatever has already been said, pharma industry's role is so varied, right? We are known for developing and discovering products, but there's so much more to just developing products than to actually bringing it to the patients into the bedsides. From investing in innovative treatment therapies to enabling access, I think the industry is on a continuous journey to improve the lives of the patients. We are not only collaborating with ecosystem partners, including the patient groups and government, to ensure that the patients not just have access to accurate diagnosis, timely treatment, and holistic care, but also finally have a say in that treatment journey, which remains so very vital to just bring in the patient perspective into the entire treatment journey, and just empower the patients to kind of own their entire treatment journey. I think the industry remains committed to solving for rare disease as a health challenge, and achieving greater visibility for rare diseases in the public health agenda as well.
Thank you. Basically, this ये बोला जा रहा है कि pharma companies are trying to develop medications and for revolutionize and making lot of change. ये नहीं कि थोड़ा बहुत change हुआ है, making a difference in people's life. So that is all. The research is going on, and we have 2 companies here who are doing for SMA pioneering work, 2 companies who are doing for Duchenne muscle dystrophy pioneering work. Can we go to the next question? What do the pharma industries gain by spending so much on research on rare diseases? But before that, why does pharma industry have to spend so much? Because patients have to understand, because especially with SMA and DMD, because of the prohibitive cost, and obviously it's because of patent and the cost there. So parents and everybody wants to understand why the cost is so much in drug development, because the lay person does not understand why they are so prohibitive costs, why is there's so much of cost involved. And secondly is, it is not on humanitarian grounds, right? So you're developing for new molecules. So, both ways, why so much expenditure? And then, how does the pharma look at it, as a, potentially viable economically for the company itself, because that's how the company is going to work forward. So we can start off with anybody who would like to say, maybe Tim only.
Sure, I'm happy to make give a few thoughts there. I think it's already been mentioned by Mr. Rajan that most of us in the industry are very focused to improving the lives of patients and families, to actually having what we call transformational change that's more than just minimal, and to really be able to show the value of the therapies over time. Therapies that get approved typically need an incredible amount of evidence. And it turns out that starting from compounds that people have ideas about to actually drugs that get approved, it's a very, very small percentage. So there's a tremendous amount of failure in drug development. That's in the early phases in the laboratory, and in the later phases in the clinic. I'm sure that many of us have had experience with phase 1 and even phase 2 programs, which are different levels of evidence creation, where drugs have had promise but then failed. It's an unfortunate thing, but I think it adds to the time and adds to the cost. It typically takes about a decade of work, 10 years, to develop a therapy and get it approved. And again, as I mentioned, it's only a very small number, and hundreds and 1,000 failures happen for each approval at least. So I think at the end of the day, I would say it's a very complex process. And I think that we should be held to very high standards. Not only is a drug safe, but is it effective? And in what ways is it effective? And how long do those effects last? I think we're seeing it now with increasingly complex therapies such as gene therapies and some of the other advanced therapeutics that we're using, that are much more costly also to produce. And the reason that I think companies are going after this is looking back specifically, especially in the rare diseases, especially in the neuromuscular diseases. Most patients have not had any access to any type of therapy, whether it's excellent or poor. There's just been very few out there. So anything that I can do personally in my work to bring, to shed light on the areas where patients have the greatest unmet medical need, I think is what we try to focus with. I'll let other folks on the panel talk also.
Probably I can jump in here and completely agree with Tim, and I just wanted to kind of share a few numbers to just further validate the point that Tim you just made. Almost 90% of the medicines or therapies being thought of or being tested at a preclinical level fail to enter into the clinical trials. It's a time when the medicines actually get tested into the patients, right? And out of 90% of these medicines that eventually come into the clinical trials, they fail to make it through the clinical trials, because as Tim said that we kind of want to hold ourselves to very high standards of the best possible efficacy and safety balance for the patients who we are trying to solve for. So I think this is a hugely attritional kind of a journey that a particular asset goes through before it can be launched into the market. And thousands of molecules do not eventually make it into the market. Eventually, there's a very, very high failure rate, and this actually represents a sunk cost. But also, apart from the development cost, some of the rare diseases are now having solutions based on new technology platforms, the cell therapies of the world, the radioligand therapies, gene therapies. Now, these new technology platforms have a very complex, nuanced, and a very expensive manufacturing and supply chain process, which again adds on to the cost. Eventually, it's a personal belief that pricing is a complex and slightly less understood topic, right? I believe that each innovative medicine should be evaluated individually based on the value it brings to the patients and healthcare system as a whole, and that the prices should reflect a number of factors, starting from the unmet medical need to the clinical value to the value to the patients, value that it brings to the healthcare systems, and lastly and more importantly, the humanistic and the societal value. But everything said and done, the ability to healthcare systems and patients to afford these medicines is an equally important component of this approach, which I think all of the pharma companies are absolutely cognizant about when they're working with the national authorities or the reimbursement bodies across the world, while coming up with sustainable, innovative access models for some of these medicines.
Thank you, Pankaj.
I think extremely valid points by Tim as well as Pankaj. Just maybe to get for the audience to get a sense of, when we're talking about numbers, I think Tim talked about 10 years of development time. Pankaj talked about 90% failure rates. Less than 10% of molecules that enter into phase 1 actually see the light of day in terms of hitting the market. When it comes to cost of development, I'm just throwing a publicly available number that as an organization, Roche spends more than $13 billion on R&D investment. Now, I think the core of science is about balancing for now and the future. Now, what we have to do is we have to look at how do we look at sustainable access for patients today, but at the same time, we'll have to look at funding options which will ensure the research continues. Because, as I said, 5 years back, there was nothing available for SMA. So tomorrow, if there are 90% or 95% of rare conditions today do not have a treatment options. So the industry is working towards solutions for that. So there has to be a mechanism where there is enough funding available to spend on those efforts. But otherwise, tomorrow you will not have a treatment option for the future. So I think it is that delicate balance which has to be arrived at. I think the goal of the industry is very clear that we have to look at something which drives patient value. So value-based pricing, so that it leads to rapid access. But I think it's critical to understand the nuance that there is a lot that goes in terms of investment on time, money, effort, and unless we kind of keep that balance in, future development will kind of suffer.
Nikhil?
Yeah, I think, thank you. To echo my fellow panelists' comments, I think why does the pharmaceutical industry invest in these rare diseases? I think patient centricity is the core value that all the companies espouse, and the companies are driven to innovation. So without that investment, what you would have is more of the similar medications for what's already proven and I'd say safe and well understood diseases. There is a lot of risk in looking at trying to develop innovative therapies for often less understood or less well characterized diseases. And it's really only the pharmaceutical industry that has an appetite to take on this risk and to echo the high rates of failure. All of that's built into the development cost, but they continue to persist because, there's this focus on being ever better and continuing. I mean, as we've talked about, 5 years ago, gene therapies were not even a conversation, and today they're here and they're potentially curative. That's completely changing how medicine is delivered. And that wouldn't have been possible without, I guess, the risk and that commitment from pharmaceutical industry to make this happen, have that vision.
Thank you so much, Nikhil. So basically, ये बोला जा रहा है कि सारा जो pharmaceutical industry parents को मध्य रखते हुए कर रहे हैं, parent centric है, और उनकी क्वालिटी ऑफ लाइफ और बच्चों का पूरा कंडीशन को ट्रांसफॉर्म करने के लिए नए इनोवेटिव तरीके से रिसर्च कर रहे हैं। और अभी ये बताया गया कि 90% जो दवाइयाँ या जो भी एजेंट्स बनते हैं, डेवलप होना शुरू होते हैं, वो आगे चल के ट्रायल्स में भी नहीं आते हैं, 10% ही आगे जाते हैं। तो मतलब काम बहुत ज्यादा करना पड़ता है बिहाइंड द सीन्स टू लीड टू वन ड्रग बाद में। So that is why probably the cost and all are very high. Can we have the next slide? The next to next actually, because next slide में मैंने cover कर दिया. The next slide was what were the various reasons for such high prices for new medications. I had clubbed both of them. Next कर दीजिए हाँ. So next is what are the difficulties faced by the pharmaceutical industries in conducting R&D activities from bringing out a new molecule into the market? What is the approximate time which takes from when you start envisaging a molecule for a specific disorder to bring it to the market? Minimize कर दो. Tim, you are leading. No.
I'm always happy. Thank you for the question. On average, what we look at least in the work that we've done, it takes about a decade, 10 years, as I mentioned, to get a drug through the process of drug discovery. Many of the therapies that we're looking at now, we've actually seen some improvement in that timeline a little bit, but the complexity of those therapies has significantly increased. I know now that not a day goes by that I am not talking with a company that is working on or getting ready to work on a gene therapy program in one disease or another, or some cellular therapy program or another advanced program using RNA technologies or other aspects of this. The complexity in drug development, I think, has continued to increase. We're hoping dearly for better data analysis, for better ways to utilize real world data. So information, generic information about patients, even without their specific identifying information that can show us trends and help us stop investigating any percent of those that fail, right? If we could determine half of the drugs that would fail earlier, we would not have to spend the time or the money on the development there. And I think that would benefit patients because it would bring us faster to those potentially positive therapeutics, but also allow us to hopefully spend less money on that. I think in the rare diseases, because this is so important for your program and what you're talking about here, we also have to remember that in many of them, not a lot of data exists. There is very limited natural history data. There are not always good outcome measures. And when we go to test drugs, we have to know what to test them against. We have to know what to show an improvement in that would actually correlate with an improvement in a patient's daily life or in their function. So I think those types of things are probably the biggest issues that we face.
If I could just maybe add to what Tim said, while we have already spoken about, the risks, the time, the cost, etc. Two other aspects. One is, I think, especially in the rare condition space, the role of partnership, right? And when, multiple stakeholders come in, the complexity goes up manifold, right? And it is a space where, less of data is available. So you need to sort of, that dependency on working with partners is extremely high. The second point is, given the very small patient population, means that clinical development historically has been challenging, in the rare disease space. So I think those two aspects, plus I think just from a data perspective, Everest-D, Nikhil is here, and Roche started partnering with PTC to sort of get this program rolling. It took about 9 years for us from ideation to getting the product launched in the US in 2020. I think that's roughly the time that it takes to kind of get a product to the market.
I would just add to that because I think it's a really incredible point that you made about collaboration, which is not something that has been very common in the pharmaceutical industry in the past. But I think in the past 5 years and in the past 1 and 2 years, I've seen some incredible things happen that companies have come together to share data early, to actually try and help make those decisions quicker, which is very patient focused. And I love to see that. I've also seen many companies now taking to heart working very closely with patient groups and patient advocacy organizations. I think, I joined a small company named Genzyme about 20 years ago. And at that time, we had very deep relationships with advocacy groups, and it changed the way that we understood the diseases that we were trying to build therapies for. It made us understand much more deeply what those patients really needed and wanted from therapies. I'm not saying that we were able to get there, but I think that we focused on it. And as we've seen an increase in the number of therapies in those diseases that they were focusing to, and the number of companies that started focusing there, we started to see the type of long-term investment. How do we make the therapy that we have better? How do we make it easier for patients to receive? How do we give it to them in their homes? These are things that some people would think is the second part of the life cycle of the drug, where competition from other companies or other therapies helps to drive a deeper focus in patient needs. Now I see many companies. They don't look at me funny when I say, "Have you spoken to the advocacy organization in that group?" No, of course we have. Not only have we worked with them, we've invested with them to build a registry to learn more about the disease, or to learn more about what the patients are experiencing. To me, it's just an incredibly important part of development. And without that, I always wonder, the companies that I talk to that aren't, I wonder how invested they are. All the companies on this call today, I know, are deeply invested in really being a partner to the patient groups and understanding not only the disease, but how it individually affects patients. And I thank all the company folks for doing that. I work for a company that helps a lot of pharmaceutical companies to build the evidence, to generate that type of data, and then hopefully to show the value. Because even though 20 years ago, if you got a drug approved, you had a therapy on the market and you were happy because you were making a difference and selling a product. I think now it's much more complex, and I'm sure that many on this call could talk about getting a drug approved it's not the end of the road in any of the pharmaceutical business now. You can't just get it approved. You have to find a way to show its value and support that over time. And also you need to work with payers who pay for the drugs, or with individuals to find ways to bring the costs down. And I know that's a question that you were going to talk about at some point, but I can tell you that every company that I work with thinks about price in this similar way in rare diseases. There is always a need to increase the access for patients. There's always a need to try and drive costs down. And I think there are people that think that's not a focus, but every day of my life in the pharmaceutical and the development industry we have tried to keep them in mind, the costs and what it is at the end of the day, to make certain that patients have access. Sorry, that was really long, but I just wanted to bring it up, and I applaud the companies that are on this call, because I know that you are deeply invested in this area.
Thank you, Tim. If I might just add from PTC's perspective, I think when we talk about R&D for pharmaceuticals, it's important for the audience to understand you're talking to companies that make the medicine. But part of these treatments in rare disease are to partner with diagnostic companies that help provide the tests that identify the specific genes for which patients will qualify for certain medications. Often you need medical device companies that need to get their technology to a point where they can enable, specifically with some of the gene therapies, those complex delivery systems that help get the medicine to the right part of the body. And so I think it's not just the drug company that is limited in terms of the opportunity, but the other stakeholders, technologies have to play catch up. And so often you might have these ideas and you might even have a molecule that shows promise, but the other aspects of what's required to help bring it to market isn't there. And frequently, pharmaceutical companies have to invest to support those developments of those allied technologies, whether it's diagnostics and or medical devices, to help bring what is essentially the medicine to market. And so Tim talked about it, so did Rajan. We're often coming into these rare diseases where the disease is poorly understood. A lot of work needs to be done to go back and quantify the natural history, understand what we, which symptoms we want to address and treat. Are those the symptoms that are the most important to address, or is there something else we need to be looking to improve? So a lot of time is spent in, okay, how can we show that we're actually making a difference and that matters? And that continues in terms of, as Timothy pointed out, it's not just enough to get the drug approved. It's not just enough to get a government to agree to pay for it. It's actually the burden remains on the pharmaceutical company to continue to capture long-term safety and efficacy data through registries, post-marketing studies, to continue to demonstrate even 10 years down the track that this drug was worth paying for and that it actually made a difference. And so the investment into that product continues long after the company has started to commercialize it.
Absolutely. And, very rightly, when your company's trial was there, you had to actually get the diagnostics done because whole exome was not being done for all patients. And I wanted to add two things. Yes, diagnostics part, what was pointed out is there has to be linked also the therapeutics part. And parents have to understand that multidisciplinary care has to continue. And those, standard of care, like for DMD, you have steroids. They don't start the steroids because of fearing side effects. So I think the parents have to understand that we have not to chase only the newer ones. We have to have the standards of care being followed. Another thing is diagnostics have to advance, because if we see even for SMA, more for SMA, because in SMA type 1, you may lose if you diagnose later, So SMA and DMD both, you need to pick them up early. So that is important. And I think a very important thing for parents, I want to add that so much effort is being made by the pharma companies. So when any patients and their parents enroll in a clinical trial when it's being developed, I think it is their moral and ethical responsibility to completely follow the protocol and be very serious about it. That is something very important commitment we expect from the parent side. That is what is very important. तो बेसिकली ये कहा गया है कि पूरा 10 साल, एक डेकेड भी लग जाता है दवाइयों को बनाने के लिए. एंड आजकल थोड़ा बढ़ गया है, एडवांस हुआ है टेक्नोलॉजी, तो मे बी थोड़ा साल कम, 7-8 साल में भी हो सकता है. पर जो डायग्नोज करने के लिए जो टेक्निक्स हैं उनके साथ कोलैबोरेट करना पड़ता है, और जो बाकी सपोर्टिव केयर है उसके साथ करना पड़ता है. और दूसरा ये इम्पोर्टेंट है आप लोगों को जानने के लिए कि जो आपका स्टैंडर्ड ऑफ केयर चल रहा है वो आपको देना है, हर हालत में देना है. जैसे स्टेरॉइड चलने होते हैं डीएमडी में, और होलिस्टिक मल्टीडिसिप्लिनरी मैनेजमेंट जिसके बारे में काफी बार बताया, दैट हैज टू कंटिन्यू. और आप किसी भी ट्रायल में जब आप पार्ट लेते हैं तो एक इंश्योर करना है कि जब आप कंसेंट साइन कर रहे हैं तो आपको मॉरली एंड एथिकली यू आर रिस्पॉन्सिबल ऑब्वियसली कि जो भी प्रोटोकॉल है उसको फॉलो करिए टू द बेस्ट ऑफ द कैपेसिटी. कई बार कोई सिचुएशन होती है जिसमें कुछ इमरजेंसी सिचुएशन होती है तो उसमें प्रोटोकॉल डिविएशन हो जाता है, बट दैट शुड बी मिनिमम. अपनी तरफ से एफर्ट रखना पड़ता है कि वी शुड फॉलो. आई थिंक दैट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट to for the for having it being a part of a trial. Thank you. I also wanted to ask you that how do you find consenting globally? Was not in the panel, just come to my mind right now because I've been taking so many consent for various trials. So see, all these RCTs only are going to make an answer. But while taking a consent, a parent, when they are told that they may come into the drug or the placebo group, so they really have double thoughts about it, because they also understand their time-bound diseases, their progression would be there and all. So I understand that the open label extension part is the only thing which interests them, and that's the reason they actually have taken consent for so many. That's the only thing which is the saving grace. They understand that in the open label extension, everybody is going to get the medication. So I mean, and then another thing is we're giving the companies are giving patients on humanitarian basis after the completion of trial. But so open label extension has to be there if we have to take consent. Until there's something like a crossover design, that's something different. But when you start giving them on compassionate use after that, but that will be for how long? Means for how long can it be viable for a pharma company to give? Because parents ask me right now, Nikhil is giving one our patients, because we've completed that Atalurin trial. So I just wonder, because parents ask me. And the other thing is also, like, all of you have, most of you have given humanitarian access programs. We could not have somebody from Biogen today, but yes, Roche has been giving, Novartis has been giving. So Novartis is one time, luckily, so you don't have a thing, but Roche has a daily drug thing. So I mean, how viable would it be? Because the parents ask, for how long will they give? So I mean, how is this aspect you look at? The humanitarian access after the compassionate use in those patients who are part of trials for your drugs, how long can be given?
I can probably start the discussion here, Dr. Gulati. It's a pretty fair question that you ask, and I'll go back to the regulations of the country. The new drugs in the clinical trial rules of 2019 in India probably tries and answers this particular question that you have asked. For how long can the access be given as a part of the local regulatory framework? It's very clear. It says that the companies will have to provide access till the time the product gets commercially available in the market. It's to ensure access, and that's the principle that all the companies, I'm sure, would be kind of applying in this kind of scenario. However, there's when the situation like a one-time therapy also kind of eases life. That's one. And secondly, you yourself also spoke about a couple of these trial design methodologies that have been used so that, the ethical aspects of a placebo-controlled trial are taken into care. You obviously, SMA is a bunch of diseases, not one disease. I'm just taking that as an example. But if you're trying out a particular therapeutic option in, say, an SMA2 and SMA3, which we know is not as aggressively progressive as an SMA1, you can still have that first year of a placebo-controlled trial, followed by a crossover kind of a design or an open label extension. So it also depends on the disease that we're talking about and the natural history and the progression of that particular disease type, which will possibly be an important ethical nuance to consider while designing some of these protocols. But I'd be happy to hear from my other panelists on their thoughts as well on this.
Yeah, so maybe just to build on to what Pankaj said, from a Roche perspective, when Everesty was, approved and not available in India, we ran a compassionate use program. And I think a lot of patients benefited because our intent was very clear that, if there is a solution, let's bring it and make it available for patients. But as Pankaj said, the guideline was that, get the product to the market. And that is where we kind of, worked with speed, agility to sort of get that molecule into the market. And within 10, 11 months of its FDA approval, you had Everesty in the Indian market. So I think that's the commitment that we want to demonstrate at one level, that when the product is not available, use mechanisms like CUP to kind of make it available so that patients do not waste. Because as you said, type 1, early intervention is critical. Otherwise, you have the risk of losing the child. So when a solution is available, make it available, and then kind of work with various partners, work with the government, work with the SEC. We work very strongly with the patient support groups like Your SMA Foundation to get the product to the market. So you don't see in the general context a product in 10, 11 months of FDA approval being launched. But here was an example because we want to prioritize and ensure that every SMA patient has the solution. So I think it's a balance. CUP when you don't have it, but work with urgency to get the product so that everybody gets access to it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't.
Go ahead,
Tim. No, I insist. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I would add that because I have the chance to work with hundreds of compounds with companies across on a small portion of their research programming, we do see not only a continuous pressure to do studies, do longer term studies that will continue to provide the evidence for the value long term. But I think also we see a lot of companies that are are very willing to do it, it creates a different level of data around their therapeutic. And I say that because we're all trying to move as rapidly as we can into the space where we can do the trial of the future, right? We can do trials that don't require a placebo group or require the smallest possible placebo experience. We're starting to use modeling, data modeling, patient modeling to try and reduce the sizes of those control groups, in essence, providing an opportunity for the drug that we're testing to be in more patients than we've ever been able to do before. And I think the other aspect is we're now trying to virtualize trials as much as we can to make it more convenient for patients and families, certainly in both of the conditions we're talking about today. The families bear a significant burden even with these clinical trials. So I know I see all of my colleagues on the panel nodding. They understand this. They hear from me and my teams, maybe we should do more for the patients here. Maybe we should provide this type of service. Maybe we should transport them from home to the clinic, or find a way to make it easier to reduce the burden of the research, because it is so powerful for us in the industry. And my hope is that in the coming decade, we will see much less reliance on the standard clinical trial with one patient getting a drug and one patient getting a placebo, but much more use of data and technologies that can drive a lot of this. I think that is a promise that we've made to patients for decades and decades, that we will get to that point. And I am starting to see things now that I was never able to see before in regard to helping identify patients, helping patients identify trials that they might be interested in. And then I would just also comment, I spoke to the first CEO that I worked for in the industry and said there's no way to keep giving patients the therapy. We can't charge for it because we had changed the manufacturing process. And he looked at my boss and said, how much will it cost to keep delivering therapies until we get this fixed? And we guessed $60 million. And it's rare to think that you would see this, but that CEO said, go ahead and do it. And we were able to provide access to that drug for 3 years at no cost for the world of people that were getting the drug. It was a big step and an important step, and amazing for me, a young person in the industry at that time, to see that kind of investment on behalf of patients. I can tell you the numbers I see now are much higher. I still see access programs with compassionate use programs, but also with free drug programs around the world from a number of companies, as I said, many on this panel and many others. Probably not enough overall. We need to keep the pressure on our industry to do the right things for patients. Not everybody views us in a positive light. And I think there have been some bad actors in the industry, but more people focusing on the needs of patients is the path that I've chosen to follow, and I imagine everyone on the panel has also.
Thank you, Tim. I might just, before Pankaj comes back in, I might just make a comment from PTC's perspective. I think you raised an important point, is that for the development of rare disease drugs, there is no relaxation of the regulatory burden or hurdles that the company has to go through, which means that when we talk about the minimum time a patient needs to be on placebo control, on the placebo arm, there is really, from the regulatory standpoint, very little flexibility. But to Dr. Gulati's point, there is the chance to then move them onto the open label. I think you've got to take a big picture view that by participating in these trials, and especially for the parents on this webinar, that you're contributing to the greater good. I think, and if you take that view, the benefit to it is that the patient has the potential to get access to that drug early, before it's sort of commercialized in the host country. But I also think, the the important point I'll make here is that I think patients in certain countries are fortunate because the standard of healthcare and the standard of researchers and clinicians are far superior, and therefore drug companies tend to want to come to countries like India to do clinical trials because there is a confidence in the quality of how that trial will be delivered, which will then contribute to the global evidence base for that drug. And so I think that is an important point to appreciate, is that if the quality of healthcare delivered in your country is of a standard and the clinicians are of global level of expertise, then you are better placed to be able to contribute early or participate early in those trials.
Thank you. Pankaj, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just a very quick point, right? We were talking about multiple stakeholders here, and for this particular problem, I actually also wanted to reach out to the academicians and researchers and clinicians like yourself, Dr. Gulati. You are in a world-class institute, and one way of probably looking at this problem of ethical problem of placebo-controlled trials is if we understand the natural history of these rare diseases much better, so that then you can have a single arm study and compare the results with the natural history data set that you already have. I think right now the understanding of a lot of these rare diseases is not so great for us to then be able to do a single arm studies, and that's where probably the role of collaboration and active interest of academia, research community, and pharma and industry also comes in. So I think that's one important point I wanted to kind of highlight. The second is what Nikhil mentioned, and I really wanted to re-emphasize on that. We need India is a clinical trial hub of the world. I think, I mean, we probably as a company, we for every asset that we have interest in, the Indian team kind of manages to get the global team convinced to allocate the trials to India, right? And this is for a reason, for a long-standing reputation of quality and integrity. We just need also the trust of the regulators and the patient community. I think you guys need to trust us that we are here to do to kind of partner with you to bring in more solutions for rare diseases and for that matter, even for non-rare diseases as quickly as possible to the country. It's also important to understand for all the parents of the patients on the call here is that there, and I think it was alluded to previously as well, there is no relaxation from a regulatory perspective for orphan drugs. At least in India, right? We still have to have the requisite data, and if we participate in trials, we trust the industry, we participate in trials, we follow through the entire duration of the trial and follow the protocol well, it gives robust evidence for the regulators to provide early approvals, and that in turn leads to earlier access and then solve some of these problems of access that happen because of the placebo controlled trial. So just these couple of points from my end, Dr. Gulati, but back over to you.
Actually, I think for the rare diseases, there is a fast track sort of, from the regulatory authorities. And I wanted to add to what Tim was mentioning about the registry. In India, with the ICMR has developed a rare disease registry in which there is neuromuscular disorders is there, and I'm in that neuromuscular disorder in which we are doing only SMA, DMD, LGMD as of now. We at AIIMS, in the Center of Excellence in Advanced Research on Childhood Neurodevelopmental Disorders, we are partnering with Ghosh UCL. AIIMS has a collaboration with Ghosh UCL, and we are developing one consolidated registry for various neurological and neurodevelopmental disorders. Actually started making different registries for different, but then over a period of time, I thought there should be one consolidated registry because many of these conditions have comorbidities. One child with one thing will have another thing. So, that is why we are starting. And the USP of that, what we are trying to develop, we are talking about natural histories, right? So in that, we are incorporating follow-up. Otherwise, usually the registries have a cross-sectional data. When the cross-sectional data, you just come to know the burden and where they are there, what kind, so that you may understand where the patients can be allocated. But this is an ambitious task. We've been trying to work about it. We have made the main data set, the combined one. We are making the add-ons for the other comorbidities, and we should be able to, I think in next couple of months, we'll be launching that. So in that, we are working not only for India, but for other LMICs and any other high income also who wants to be part, because it's not like a medical record forms, And we are also adding to the new scales and all for follow-up and diagnosis. So I think in that way, we are going to empower the professionals in the respective countries to get it. And this will be a continual process. And adding the follow-up in this, it was the same reason, is to understand the natural history of various conditions so that, it may help in future. Yeah, Tim wants to say. Yeah.
I would just add, and to understand the natural history in the Indian population, which may be different than other populations and in every population. So I think opening up the world and the opportunity to participate in clinical research is critical. I know that PPD, my company, and actually we're owned by Thermo Fisher. Thermo Fisher also has invested deeply in clinical trials. In India, we have many, many ongoing right now. And as has already been mentioned, we definitely find the medical capabilities to be excellent. And we've also found the patients to be highly interested in the opportunity. We're going to continue to grow in India. We've been developing some pediatric networks that we do there. And in the past 5 years, we've done about 550 clinical trials in rare diseases with partner companies, that are developing therapeutics. And access to India, the interest that we see is critical. And it's exactly right. We've also seen development of country registries that have been incredibly powerful. What we're hoping to do as part of these research efforts, along with other CROs in the world, clinical research groups like ours, along with other companies, is start to bring that data together. As I mentioned, we've done about 20 to 25 Duchenne studies, studies of patients with Duchenne of different ages, of different functional abilities, of different therapeutics over the past 5 years. There is probably considerable power in the data that's been collected, even when we didn't see a positive effect of the company's drug. We have to find ways to connect that data together and pull out as much as we can from it. We're starting to see that now, but I do think that with the digital ecostructure that we're building, not just PPD, but all of the companies that are out there, we have to find ways to push that together. The technology is starting to bear some significant fruit there, and we are incredibly hopeful that the modeling, that the real-world evidence, looking at data from hospital systems can really help to do a number of things. One, it's diagnose patients early, because probably every rare disorder patient is served by an earlier diagnosis. Every one of us can tell you stories of patients we know who saw 20 or more physicians before a diagnosis was made. And that just has to end. We have the technologies to do that. We're starting to explore looking at whole genome sequencing technology in infants in the ICU. And just the sequencing can identify 20 to 30% of the diagnosis that would not have been picked up. There's a network in the US, and there's several networks across the globe that are doing this type of work. This is where I hope that the scientific promise of what we're doing will be able to deliver more therapies, and hopefully therapies that can be brought to patients at a cheaper price down the road. But we have to bring a lot of partners along with us, the regulators and the payers, to understand the value here.
Tim, one question which comes to my mind. When any company decides to make a molecule in a condition, I don't know whether you do, but should it not be the stakeholders, the professionals who have years and years of expertise? I mean, you yourself are one of them. I mean, are from globally, from different continents, different countries, be involved when you are planning the protocol? Because I'm saying in some other trials, when we had the investigator meetings, then we make some suggestions, and then then they had to go and get the all those addendums and the versions and all that. You have to again go and get approved. Why cannot the industry identify those leaders who are working in that area and have a brainstorming. And now with everything going virtual, it is very, very simple. I mean, it is not that one has to travel. I mean, it was always there, but COVID has made it more accessible to everybody, that and more everybody's become used to it. Otherwise, everything was possible. We did Zoom meetings earlier when somebody was not able to travel. That was an exception. Now it is becoming the route. So I'm just saying, why doesn't the pharma feel the need that during the inception you have the people working on your pharmacokinetics and all, but for the clinical thing, and when the protocols are being developed, why can't different continents be represented by academicians who've been working for long? I mean, this is just coming to my side, because then you don't need different versions. There's so many versions you have for all trials, and you have to take ethics and all, and why? And it's delaying time. Just wondering. I mean.
Yeah, I'll just be very short so I can let everyone else talk. But every company that I work with is working with advisors, multiple advisors usually, maybe not always international advisors, but I think they are looking for input, not only from physicians, academicians, people who are deeply studied in their disease. I think they're also looking for input from patients, and I'll let the company folks talk on here too, but I have seen massive protocol changes and improvements that were generated by genuine conversations with individual patients or patient groups. And I think it's been really impactful for the past decade of how we have started to see that we can't solve this with the science alone. We must involve the patients and understand it. I'll let the others comment.
Yeah, you're right. The patients also, because they're actually going through it. The parents are seeing it. So certain things we may miss, even as clinicians. So I think parents have to be involved. So I was just feeling different continents being represented rather than local advisors. Yeah, rest of.
Yeah, I would just add, I have a development team meeting that happens every month, and then we have one that happens every quarter that is a very large meeting with several hundred people. Every one of those meetings is begun with a patient presenting about their disease, talking about their experience, because we want all of the people that are working in our industry that are trying to develop drugs and test these potential things to understand what it is like for patients on a daily basis. I think it drives us, and we try to continually expose ourselves to the unmet needs that are still out there.
Anybody wants to add? Anybody wants to add? You are mute.
Yes, I think one, to what Tim said, in terms of one design, I think second is about, being inclusive and kind of, from an Indian context, see how, we are getting represented. So I see there is there's a huge shift. Just to share data from a Roche perspective, today, we have more than 80% of global clinical trials where India is a participant. So, which clearly indicates that, the intent of bringing those products into the market is extremely strong. You have that involvement, you get the product into the market, which is fantastic for, patients in the country. And again, from a, just from data perspective, there are global clinical trials in hemophilia and something on head and neck cancer where we have the largest recruitment from the market here. So, it just shows that, one, the diversity of, the patients that you want to include, as well as, trying to be inclusive in terms of overall, getting the right kind of data for drug development. I think, that's already happening in the industry side.
Nikhil?
Yeah, look, I think I must confess I'm not across the details of the clinical development programs at PTC, but I would assume that there is a sort of, they do make sure they include prominent clinicians from across the globe. Sometimes it may be North America and Europe that tend to be involved early, if it just happens that that's where sort of the publications have come out of. But I think to the point Rajan's made here, that as India becomes more and more relevant as a first destination for trials, it's inevitable that they would ensure that they've understood how healthcare is developed in India to make sure that any potential trial development would reflect how, the version of healthcare delivered here to make sure that it's feasible and not have to build something here that doesn't exist to meet the needs of a trial.
Rajan, want to add?
Was that to me? No, nothing specific on that.
Okay. ये अभी तक ये बात हो रहा है कि हम लोग जब ड्रग ट्रायल का कंसेंट लेते हैं तो आधों को दवाई शुरू में मिलती है, आधों को नहीं मिलती। मोस्ट ऑफ द जो आरसीटीज के होते हैं उसके बाद ओपन लेबल एक्सटेंशन होता है जिसमें सबको मिलती है। पर अभी ये बताया जा रहा है कि डिफरेंट तरीके से कुछ डेटा मॉडलिंग, पेशेंट मॉडलिंग वगैरह करने से वो जितने लोगों को ड्रग नहीं मिल रही है, प्लेसिबो मिल रहा है, वो थोड़ा कम करा जा रहा है। और वैसे भी बाकी सबको अल्टीमेटली ड्रग मिलती ही है। और जो ड्रग ये जो ट्रायल्स डिजाइन होते हैं उसके अंदर पेरेंट्स और बच्चों को, जो अगर जो बड़े होते हैं, जो पेशेंट्स और उनके पेरेंट्स को इन्वॉल्व किया जाता है, उनका एस्पेक्ट भी देखा जाता है और प्रोफेशनल्स का देखा जाता है। वो ज्यादातर कई बार ग्लोबली नहीं होता है, तो यही हम सजेस्ट कर रहे थे कि ऑब्वियसली पेरेंट्स को भी करेंगे तो ग्लोबल रिप्रेजेंटेशन डिफरेंट कॉन्टिनेंट्स के, क्योंकि वो डॉक्टर्स को हर एक की प्रॉब्लम्स का डिफरेंट पता है। तो और रजिस्ट्री के बारे में बताया है, जो आईसीएमआर का एक रजिस्ट्री है रेयर डिजीज का, और एक हम लोग जो एक रजिस्ट्री बना रहे हैं नॉट ओनली रेयर डिजीज, न्यूरोलॉजिकल और न्यूरो डेवलपमेंटल में, और उसमें फॉलोअप भी होगा। Now I've left those questions, the things which are to be think besides new drug development. Where do you take it as repurposing of drugs in today's scenario? Because if you see the ongoing trials, especially for DMD and all, you have so many drugs being tried at different levels, because the drugs in DMD you are going to give something which is affecting for the dystrophin part, which is having directly, like you have your atalurin and you have those exon skipping agents. But for the other part of free radical and inflammatory, there's so many things going on. So, I mean, where do we stand? And, what's this, how do you look at it? New drug versus repurposing?
Probably I can kickstart here, I think this is one effective way to probably reduce the time as well as the cost of the clinical trials, right? That's one. I think truly repurposing of the drugs can drive a lot more efficiencies in the way we approach drug development and we approach providing solutions to the patients of a variety of diseases. I think one thing that Dr. Gulati that is helping this is the advancements in artificial intelligence, machine learning, computational modelings in probably, having technologies like high throughput screening, in silico testing. These are all probably jargons, but they probably take a use of data and digital and artificial intelligence to scan millions of compounds, probable compounds, existing compound libraries, and then try and match them to the targets that we are probably trying to target within the human system, or the basis the understanding that we have currently of the disease mechanism. So I think because of these advancements over the last 10 years, I think the process has now gathered steam. It's much more efficient and quicker, and probably much more in the realistic realm of things than what it was 1 decade back. Otherwise, earlier with the conventional drug development kind of plan, you had a probable hypothesis, you had to go out, test it in the real world setting before getting an answer. Now with digital, I think you can get a lot of these modeling going and probably come to a fairly better estimate and a better hypothesis before testing those hypotheses in the clinical trial setting, just reducing the chances of failure, decreasing the cost and time that is needed, but realistically also giving these old products a chance to possibly serve patients of some other disease or some other indication.
Tim?
I think there are so many things that we are facing right now when it comes to access and equity and equity in regard to the delivery of these therapies that we have to keep a spotlight on that. I'm in a different role, working in a research organization, but I have spent time working in companies. We thought about price every day and access and how we brought that to patients. And I would just say that I think we have to continue to push on this. Sometimes that's by commenting in the news media about access and about trying to make it more affordable for all patients across the globe. It's a tricky thing for companies to talk about because they, companies are in business, and the cost of drug development it's truly astronomical. But I do think that we have to keep putting pressure on how do we do it right? How do we make certain that patients with these diseases get access to these therapies? And then in addition to that, I think that when we do trials, that we are committing to the patients to do no harm, as we doctors say, first, and also to find ways to assist the patients with that burden of research. I've seen every company that I work with doing this to some degree. Some do it much better than others, but I think it's just something that we have to keep pushing on. I just wanted to add that. I hope that's okay.
And why are the Indian pharmaceutical company R&Ds not that at a pace? Any reason and anything we can do? I mean, maybe that can reduce the cost. If I don't know, it may or may not, because anyway it's astronomical. But I mean, why? I mean, what is the reason? If somewhere, why do you think Indian R&D in Indian companies is not that much?
Dr. Shivali, maybe not on specifically on that, but the previous question, I just want to add a point, in terms of whether it is repurposing or new discovery, just again, some data for us to consider. Slightly dated, I think somewhere around 2020, I think the number of drugs from a Roche perspective that were in the rare disease space under development, 15 medicines in the clinical development or approved across 12 rare disease conditions. Just talk about a few years back, what it was to kind of how it has been accelerated. I think you look at, the prior knowledge, the work that has been done over the last 1 decade, I think you will start seeing more and more of this happening. And I think just for, the audiences here, why this is so critical for, pharma companies, I think data again, says, there are about 7,000 rare diseases, and globally more than 400 million people suffer from rare conditions. That number is combined beyond more than what cancer and HIV together are. And out of that, 30% of patients are, or more than 50% of them are actually children. And we know that, many of these, do not live beyond, the 5th birthday, so on and so forth. And today, we do not have 95% of rare conditions do not have a treatment option. So, just the enormity of the challenge that lies in front of us is a huge motivation for pharma to kind of really step up and say that we need to solve for this. Because I think you had a, question in the past saying that, why is this so important for pharma? I think because we want to make a difference in these lives. This is a huge audience. Every patient counts, and that is what the purpose of the pharma industry is.
Thank you so much. We're coming to the end of the session. Before we go to the next session, I am firstly thank the panelists, and especially Tim, who's past midnight, is up there, and Nikhil from Australia, and of course, Office Rajan and Pankaj, and really grateful. And I just want you to leave one message, how we can change now with the post-COVID world. Anything specifically what we should look at and try to change or implement? Just one message you want to give, and specifically anything post-COVID.
Maybe I'll start it.
Because parents are looking for drugs, and they'll be looking for accessible drugs. So that way, post-COVID right now, what is your final, message?
Given rare conditions, maybe, linkage to COVID less, but, I think what we're trying to solve is how do you look at sustainable access? While at one front, you heard that there is development happening, there is strong focus across the board from pharma industry. I think it is for us to collectively solve how do we track access. We know that these are expensive therapies. So, how does a government and a payer system come together? How do we treat duties? Today, many of these drugs, especially in the Indian context, attract duties. Now, is there a way that, the burden on the patient can be reduced? And I think from an industry's perspective, what we are trying to do is look at patient support programs. It is just not about making the drug available, but what more can you do so that, when in the patient care journey, how are you handholding the patient, whether it's through the form of information, whether it's through compliance, whether it's through various other stuff. Like, for example, in the case of SMA, how do you look at physiotherapy? How do you look at counseling? How do you really help? Because, rare conditions don't impact the patient alone. It impacts the entire family. It impacts societies. So I think it's a larger context. I think for us, the core is how do I look at sustainable access? And I think that is where the invitation to sort of partner, the invitation to say that, how do we kind of request the government to come out with programs, sustainable funding options, so that, really patient, because at one level, we can bring the drug to the market. The second level is how do you make it available and accessible to them?
Thank you. Thank you, Rajan. Tim?
I'm not sure it has anything to do with the pandemic, but I'm glad we're at least to the place where we are with that. But I would say, I think a big driver for a lot of the costs that we have right now are the regulatory frameworks. I think we need to make the agencies understand that we can't recapitulate every piece of data for every single program. Part of the work that we're doing with the NIH, with the bespoke gene therapy program, is to try and look at ways to get the agencies to understand that maybe you don't have to do every phase of every study in a new indication if you're using some of the same manufacturing, some of the same vectors and things like this. I think that if we can reduce the costs of development, and if we can use the technology to reduce the timelines, reduce the failure rates, that we can hopefully pass that savings on to patients through lower prices, through better access. But I think we also need to just continue pushing for a more equitable landscape for eventual drug distribution, either through those markets or through value mechanisms. And I guess I can relate it to COVID and say, we've all been through this. This was a global problem that we've dealt with, better, worse, whatever. It's a global situation that we've dealt with. And I think the lack of diagnostics, the lack of therapeutics in rare diseases should be a global focus for us. And it's why I was so happy to have the chance to speak with you all today.
Thank you, Tim. Pankaj and Nikhil?
I think I'll try and draw some parallels from COVID. COVID for me was that one black swan event that saw some unparalleled, undocumented kind of a historical collaboration that happened between private, public, academia, research, regulators, people, and just about everybody rallying together. And we saw the power of collaboration. I just think that rare disease, it's so devastating for the individual, the patient, the caregivers, and society in general. I think it just needs that kind of a social mobilization where all the stakeholders come together, do a bit, respect each other's mutual interest, each other's perspective, but push along through all the difficulties that are currently there. I think industry I probably speak on behalf of the industry, but industry is ready to take that first step. We'll probably need all other stakeholders also to probably just trust the industry, join hands with us, and then let's see what we can do with collaboratively in the space of rare disease.
Yeah, I know, just to add to what Pankaj said, I think the good part that has happened with COVID is healthcare has come into our dining rooms and drawing room discussions. Was at least in the Indian context, that was not the case. Today, you see, I know the next session is on, media. There is a strong focus from media in terms of reporting on healthcare, across, different, disease areas. And I think healthcare is thick and central to our lives, unlike, what it was in the past.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Nikhil?
Yeah, look, just to add, I think what the pandemic showed was where there is a need, governments around the world can mobilize very quickly and show that urgency needed to deliver healthcare solutions. I think from a rare disease perspective, speaking for India, it's about that voice, making sure that the rare disease community continue to highlight their needs and keep it relevant to make sure government can move and respond to that.
Thank you so much. I thank all the panelists. We have overshot the time. I'll just request Dr. Kakuli to put the poll questions, and meanwhile, just go through the questions in the next 2 minutes while the poll is on, and before we formally end this part of the session.
We'll keep the poll questions on for 2 minutes.
Yeah. Meanwhile, we just go through the questions if we see whether they have not been answered. I think it was a very fruitful discussion. We just see the questions. How do pharma companies decide on which rare disease or aspect of it they should work on? Do parent advocacy organizations approach the pharma companies, or does the medical fraternity authorities approach them? And then there is Roche and Sarepta recent Embark phase 3 program. Any kid recruited from India? Agree with you that all the time taking to develop a new drug around a decade, if 85% of the time is lab, it's accepted. If it is more than 15% time outside the lab for approvals and other regulatory things to be addressed. And so this is, they all have been asked by one individual. So I just put them together. Anybody would like to add? Rest of the questions are answered, yeah.
On the question on how does it get selected or what, I think, I think the addressable market is so huge. As I said, 90 to 95% of rare diseases do not even have a solution today. So, I think it's more about, with science trying to sort of figure out what can be solved and then kind of starting to sort of keep solving that. As I said, today the pipeline looks more attractive from a rare disease perspective. So I think it's a journey that has been started, and you will see more and more of it happening. And to the specific question on whether there is a kid included in the trials there, I'm not aware of it. I could sort of check back and come back.
Thank you. I think we've answered all the questions, and even there's nothing extra on the YouTube. I'm really grateful to all of you to have joined. And Tim, it is early hours of morning. It's past midnight for you. Thank you so much. And Nikhil, it's late in the afternoon for you. Thank you. Thanks a lot. And I think we need to work together. We have to work together for the parent, ultimately for the patient care. And I think early diagnostic to having the newer treatments along with the multidisciplinary holistic standard of care, which has to go on, plus parent support and groups with giving support to the parents. So thank you so much. Really grateful to you.
Thank you for the invitation, Dr. Gulati.
Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Gulati.
Dr. Kakuli will close it formally, the first half of the session. And
thank you, all the panelists. We also had Mr. Lalit Gupta, Mr. Rahul Mehrotra, and Ms. Seema Desai, who had joined here to share their views and questions and to hear us and support us. Definitely, I agree with I had spent over 17 years in drug discovery. So definitely, I agree from the synthesis part to the in silico drug designing, then the cellular mechanistic actions, then the preclinical, the formulations, the regulatory, and the clinical trials are all definitely takes a toll on the time, which really is somehow or the other, all the patients who are looking forward for benefit are really, with the time they need to catch up with it. And it is really helpful that we have humanitarian access program and free access program, which are benefiting the patients with long-term access to the new drugs. Thank you, all the panelists. Thanks for joining, and be with us for all the other sessions which have been shared with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I now welcome everyone for the second part of the second webinar session today, which is on a very important topic, role of print, electronic and social media in raising public awareness regarding DMD and SMA. I will request Dr. Kakuli to introduce our panelists, please. Can you mute others? Can you please mute others?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Shefali. We are now into the second session of our today's webinar, which is the role of media, print or digital. How is it bringing the awareness within the community regarding the DMD or SMA, which we are focusing on these two diseases. The moderator, we will invite Dr. Gagandi Singh. He is a consultant neurologist associated with Dayanand Medical College and Hospital, Ludhiana. He is head of Neurology division. He is president-elect Indian Academy of Neurology.
He has a vast, too many years of experience, and he's also president of Indian Epilepsy Association and many more international agencies. That is why we thought he would be the best person to moderate.
The other panelists which we are grateful that we have the media people who have joined us. We have Ms. Kiran Bharadwaj, we have Mr. Durgesh Jha, we have Mr. SP Singh from All India Radio, we have Mr. Rajesh Mishra from Doordarshan, we have Mr. Balkrishna from Aaj Tak.
Actually, Kiran has been doing the total health for since its inception in DD News. And Durgesh has been traveling, had to travel somewhere. He'll be joining shortly. He is the health reporter for Times of India. Mr. SP Singh was just retired from the All India Radio, but for last 3 to 4 decades, he was doing that Uthe Achhe Swasthya Ke Liye in the morning and many other health shows. And Mr. Balkrishnan is dealing with the Aaj Tak, and Rajesh Mishra ji also he's in DD Kisan, and he also does all the health program series. Dr. Gavandeep sir, we would hand it all over to you. We can flash the slides when you ask us.
Hello, so can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you, sir, but you can't see.
There is some problem with my camera, and as I've asked them to look into what is the problem, it says that Zoom is not getting linked to the camera, so I'm not sure what is the problem. But the first thing I would like to say is thank you, Dr. Shefali, and your entire team for thinking of this and conceiving this project and fruitifying this important initiative. I mean, people who are afflicted by Duchenne muscular dystrophy, people who are afflicted by rare diseases like SMA, I mean, they're uncommon, there is no doubt, but they are so profoundly affected. And to have a series of webinars and to disseminate information on this rare condition, I think the way you have conceived it, the way you have thought about it, and the way you have planned it is absolutely fantastic. I would very warmly welcome all the elite and eminent members of the press who are here today. And you are extremely knowledgeable and you are extremely influential in shaping the views of the country. And because of that, Dr. Shefali and her team have really worked hard and have got you to this particular webinar. And I know and I completely understand how busy you are and how many things you have to deal with, from all kinds of politics and political developments to whatnot, and having spared time for these rare conditions and for the people who are affected by these rare conditions. I think hats off to you, completely hats off to you. All the members from the media, all the members of the press who are here, and having spared nearly about an hour for Duchenne muscular dystrophy, for all these conditions. So profuse thanks, and with this introduction and with this basic foundation, I think we should go ahead and start a little bit of discussion and debate, if possible, on this. The things that need to be discussed, I mean, we all know, and Dr. Shefali was already talking to others and had explained the importance of, and the newer developments, particularly, therapeutics is a very exciting field, and therapeutics is always exciting because it, newer developments means better life and better conditions for a better quality of life for people with these rare disorders. But they come at a huge cost. And that cost is something which is extremely important, and we need to be mindful of it, particularly being from a low resource setting, a country like India, where patients have often to pay out of their pocket. And once newer medicines, newer therapeutic modalities are all really, really very expensive. So it is always a big issue, and therefore, hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You're
Yeah,
audible.
please. Right. Suddenly, I get a message that I'm signed out. So with this, I think can I float the first question? How is it that you have planned, Dr. Shefali, that
Sir, so you can ask any. Sir, there were just these questions listed which were shared. And sir, I forgot to introduce from Roche, because Roche, they started, Every City was launched last year in July. So Mr. Rajan from Roche will be also be a part of the panelists, because they are trying to advocate, through this media, all the various medias, social media, as well as all other print and newspaper. So he's there. So he's also there, joined. That was forgot to introduce. So these are questions you can just whatever you decide, sir, you can ask individually, or what everybody else is joined except from Mr. Singh. Yeah, rest all of them.
I'll formally introduce Mr. S. Rajan, as he had been there for with us for the first session also. Dr. Rajan leads the corporate affairs, communication, and CSR functions at Roche Pharma India. He joined Roche in October 2020. He is also an active member of Government Affairs and Rare Disease Communities at Organization of Pharmaceutical Producer of India and FICCI. He has nearly 20 years of leadership, communication, and external affairs experience in health sector at organizations such as GE Healthcare, Abbott, and Dr. Reddy's. Welcome, Dr. Rajan, again for our the second session, role of media.
Sir, and sir, we are having all this live stream on YouTube and are being recorded and will be there on our website as well as Global Genes US website, sir. So please, you can take questions as you want, and these are just you can ask anything. I mean, these are just.
Let's start with this question. And I think it's very relevant that we need to understand why is it important, what is the necessity. I mean, these are rare diseases. So why the public should be really aware of them? What is the reason? And the two classical examples are Duchenne muscular dystrophy and spinal muscular atrophy. So, I mean, I think this is a question which needs to be answered by the most important stakeholders in this, the people who are looking after Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, and also from Roche, Mr. Rajan. So if you could, starting with Dr. Shefali and then Mr. Rajan, as to what is the necessity? Why do we need public awareness? Why should the public? I mean, there are so many things. People have diarrhea. People have all kinds of things. But why this?
Yes, so they need to know, because many people, they don't understand what are the red signs ki doctor ko dikhana hai. So they have to be aware. SMA child may be little bit floppy, otherwise is looking around, to usko lagega weak hai, So they have to understand that which are the red flags ki kya suspect hota hai, so that they go out to a doctor. And one is this diagnostic aspect, early access. Second I think is very important for destigmatization, which I think is more important, because these parents face a lot of problems, because बाद में कुछ wheelchair पे होते हैं, किसी को otherwise ये तो motor वाले function वाले problem है इन लोगों में, the way उसके हमारा तो accessibility नहीं है. Disability जो word है वो क्यों है? एक medical condition है बच्चे को जो किसी प्रकार की है, जो हम बात कर रहे हैं DMD and SMA, right? Plus the environment में physical environment कि हमारे को wheelchair के लिए ऊपर नीचे करना पड़ रहा है, we don't have a proper way, washrooms नहीं है, वो सब availability, वो infrastructure है, plus the people around you. So it's the attitude of the person, the way a person looks at the patient. That is the way, we want empathy. We do not want somebody to look down upon, मजाक बना रहे हैं, कुछ देख रहे हैं, उनको अगर कोई जा रहा है wheelchair पे, कितना कोई उसको कोई support करेगा, दूसरा राह चलता है वो person to navigate. So that is the reason that the media has to tell, और ये किसी parent की या बच्चे की गलती नहीं है कि उसको problem है. So that is how, if the media spreads this word, तो उसमें this is very important to make a better place for these people. जो उनकी बीमारी है उससे तो लड़ेंगे ही, ताकि वो disability ना बने, both physically and mentally. That is what I look at it, sir.
Very well said. Mr. Rajan, would you like to add to this?
Yes, Dr. Singh, thank you. So I think by definition, if you look at rare disease, it's a small percentage of the population that gets impacted. So given that generally the conversations around rare disease is limited. So I think now with more and more awareness happening, I think the role of media would be to sort of bring the challenges that they face, the stories of grit and determination of these patients into forefront so that this becomes part of mainstream conversation. And as Dr. Gulati said, many of these the challenges that patients suffering from rare disease go through, sometimes it is very tough for a normal human being to understand that these are challenges that they could have. So how do you really kind of make that understanding? How do you start empathizing with them so that you kind of start treating them with a different lens is extremely critical. I think a couple of other aspects, right? Because from an emotional perspective, it's a very human need to have a sense of belonging. It's very common for us to have a sense of connection, community building, so on and so forth. In cases of rare disease, unfortunately, many of the patients face those challenges. So getting accepted with the society, etc., media has a strong role to play in terms of helping these patients be part of mainstream. And lastly, I would just say, given that it is an evolving space, today there is lack of data. There is lack of data. There is lack of registry, which means that many of these patients go undiagnosed. So from an early screening, early intervention perspective, how do you kind of really bring it to light so that patients get screening early, so that in the case of SMA, for example, early intervention can save a life. Especially in SMA type 1, if the patient is diagnosed early and put on therapy, chances of the child having a proper development is extremely high. So how do you bring that conversation into mainstream is what I think the role of media could be.
Yes, thank you. I think it's extremely important. And if I may actually add, I'm permitted to add, is there are a lot of policy making issues which need to be done, but unfortunately seem to be missing. So unless there is public awareness, and administrators and politicians are driven by public opinion. So I think it's extremely important. Like if we have to have, let's say, toilets, public facilities and toilets with special provisions for certain people with these kind of special or disabilities or special abilities, then that is going to be driven only by public opinion. So that is why public opinion is, and the media can do a lot. And so from the media side, if there are any points that they think it is important, why do you think it is important? Because if you guys think it is important only, then it would really be important. So Mr. Balkrishna or Mr. Jha, any you
Yeah.
think, do you agree that these are important, and how?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Gagandeep. Thank you, Dr. Shefali, and hello to my co-panelists. So, Dr. Gagandeep, there are two aspects of this, I feel, the role for media. The first is that you highlighted, and Dr. Shefali said that India is a big country, and we all know that the government has limited resources, and the resources are not generally assigned for rare diseases. Rare diseases are always neglected because the reason being given is when we talk to people, when we talk to ministers, when we talk to people who are in power, they say that, they can't afford to look at a smaller group of people. Their focus is always on the always on the population, which is a bigger problem in terms of numbers. That is a bigger challenge that can be discussed later. But one small thing that you discussed is that because there is no awareness about this, so there are smaller things which do not take much resources. Like you said that if you go to hospitals, if you go to schools, if you go to public places, they are not disabled friendly. Disabled friendly architecture, disabled friendly is not something which is part of the planning. That doesn't take too much of resources. If you go to schools, if you go to any public place, even hospitals, I have seen that they are not, when the architecture is big design, disability is something that is not kept in mind, is never part of the planning. But that doesn't take too much of resources. That is something that needs to change, and that is something that doesn't take resources. The second part is that we all know that the rare diseases are something they are not well understood. So even in people, even in media, people do not know much about them. I mean, once in a while, there is an article about DMD or some other rare diseases, but what we mostly see is there is a press conference and there's some doctor announces something and there is an article which says that which promises some magic cure kind of thing. So people who are affected, the families who are affected are always looking for some credible information. And unfortunately, that is not the case. So generally they fall for something which is not very credible, they fall for marketing gimmicks. They do not know where to approach, which is the right doctor to approach, where they do not know. People generally are isolated and they do not know what is the right kind of. So I have seen that you might have seen like in case of DMD or disease like this, once in a while I see, and we get many letters and requests in Ask the Candida today, people asking us to verify whether this is right. There's some doctor in some corner of India would say that there is a stem cell therapy that can cure this disease completely, which is I understand is not the case, which is not right. But lack of credible information is something which makes the case even worse for the families.
Yeah, thank you. So I think very well said. And yes, so this is something, Mr. Jha, would you like to add to, or is there anything else beyond what has already been said and quite beautifully and very eloquently said? You need to unmute yourself, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
First, thank you, Dr. Gulati, for inviting me to be a part of this panel. And this is such an important subject. And I agree that in media also, the frequency of articles on rare disease, the understanding needs to be increased further. We need to write a lot more and understand the disease in a better way so that we can explain to the general public about it. As far as, why awareness is needed, I agree with Mr. Rajan, what he's saying. One of the things, rare disease, I know like it's a rare disease, and like compared to many other diseases that we come across in our daily lives, infectious, non-infectious, non-communicable diseases, the numbers may be less, but the like severity, the problem people who have a person suffering from the disease face is a lot more. So if there is increased awareness, it may help diagnose more cases and in time, so that good right intervention can be made at the right time and people's lives can be managed better, or in some cases saved. That is one of the benefits of awareness. Second thing is, if people are more aware, they don't like somebody's family has a child suffering from Down syndrome or other rare disease. If they know, like there are more people suffering like us, there's a sense of empathy, and they can learn from if a hospital which is treating rare diseases regularly, what are the novel interventions that are coming, what are the ways we can manage a child or person suffering from rare disease better. So if there is such information coming across like through media or through other resources, it will really help them manage things better. So that is how I think awareness is a very, very important aspect of rare diseases.
Yes, and there are some very good comments from the audience. Of course, there is increased accessibility, providing end supporters to doctors, school managements, policymakers. So all of these, schools, school teachers, they are important stakeholders in the care provision for people with these disorders. So awareness has to be directed to all such. The first thing that probably needs to be done is someone needs to make a list of all kind of stakeholders that are likely to be involved, and then the idea is to create awareness, which includes the bus driver and the conductor also, because if they know about DMD, they know about the problems faced by people with DMD, then they are going to be, they will understand what are their special needs when they climb up the bus. So public awareness is extremely important. So now this question is specifically for the esteemed panelists from the media, and it's about there are a number of ways. Things have changed. We used to read the newspapers. Newspaper still comes to all of us at home. Early morning. But most of us now have stopped reading newspapers because we managed to get the news from various other inputs, including the social media, the internet, and so on and so forth. So this question is, if we have to really successfully spread awareness, how can we go ahead doing it to increase the reach? See, one thing is to increase the reach, and we need to increase the depth of the depth and the breadth of our reach of the awareness campaigns. And therefore, number one, what are the most effective ways in modern times? So this is a question that I would pose to, can I ask Ms. Kiran Bhardwaj to start and tell us what, in your opinion, are the best ways, most effective ways, most cost-effective ways. Effective means effective in dissemination and cost-effective. Dr. Shefali wants to say something. Please feel free whenever you want to say something before that.
And sir, I was asking her to ask Kiran.
Hello?
I was requesting you to ask Kiran. That's all.
Yeah. So, Kiran, madam, if you could kindly tell us, is it still the conventional newspapers? I'm from that generation, so I still read the newspapers, but I am becoming a little more sparing and in terms of reading the newspaper.
So she's been running the Total Health Show of DD News for I don't know how many episodes, Kiran, till now?
Yeah.
Unmute.
You're not audible, Kiran ma'am.
Unmute yourself. Kiran madam, you need to unmute yourself.
I need
your
ma'am,
mic
we are not able to hear you.
Your mic is muted. Can you please check that?
Should we put a message on the screen so that
can I?
Hello, am I audible now?
Yes.
Hello. Yeah, Dr. Shefali, am I audible? Yeah,
yes.
That's very important. In fact, as Dr. Gagandeep said, that making the communication more important, effective, and in fact, cost effective is very necessary. When we talk about awareness, I would definitely mention, as we are running this show, Total Health, for past almost 20 years, and we are almost near to completing 1,000 episodes of this live show. So when we started in 2004, the kind of attitude we used to see, specifically in terms of awareness and the questions that people used to ask, and now, so many years being passed, there's a huge difference in that. So definitely awareness is there, and as you asked Dr. Gagandeep, that what is the way to in fact make it more impressive and cost effective. So definitely we working in Doordarshan News, being a public broadcaster, we have been serving and doing the service of giving the information to masses. So television, especially the visual media, can be said to be the most effective one, because the visuals make a lot of impact on the people's mind. And secondly, the way we present the programs, it is in the layman terms, in the simple language, where even the people, a layperson, a person from the rural area, a person in the remote areas, they're able to understand about the disease, the symptoms, and they are actually getting the information in a very simple way. So one, the effective ways would be running the news stories that we regularly do. Secondly, the discussions and the programs related to what government is doing for them, what are the support available for the patients and the families, what are the facilities available, how important is it to get the screenings done when we talk about the genetic diseases which have huge implication, the cost implication, and of course they affect the family and the society also. And there is the impact on the psyche of the person who is affected, and in fact the family, because the medications that are being used and the treatment sometimes is too costly. So it becomes very important that they have the information about these diseases in a simple and effective way. So we can run the campaigns that we generally do, a small story, we cover the events and the awareness programs also, which is in simple Hindi. And Doordarshan specifically have regional channels also. So they translate the information and messages into simpler terms and local languages. So even the reach is more, and we are able to reach not only to the countries and the people staying abroad, but specifically the patients and the people who actually need this information and awareness, who are not that literate, who are not having the support, and who cannot reach to the place they can get the support. So this information that yes, if your child has such disease, a rare disease, the two diseases that we are talking about, SMA and DMD, so the parents should be able to identify that these are the symptoms. If they see any unusual symptom, they need to go to the doctor or the nearest pediatrician available, and then they reach the health setting where they can get the right kind of guidance, the treatment, and the process in which the patient can come, where he can get all the support and treatment also. So the ways, if we talk about the effective ways, the messages should be simple, crisp, the language should be effective, and we should use the mediums which are actually easily understandable for the patient and the family. With that, I mean the people who are not into the medicine field and would be able to understand only the simple language. So we try and make the messages in that simple terms, so each and every person get the right message and can come under the treatment umbrella, because reaching the right doctor is must in such cases.
Fantastic. I think very well said. And yeah, point is, visual impressions can often create the best impact. But is that probably these days social media, besides the conventional media, that is television and newspapers. So, Mr. Jha, would you like to say what is your view about the role of social media?
Yes, video is actually not very clear on this. Can you
Hello?
hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So, very important tool these days, to share stories, patient stories, good practice, use it. The only problem social media, like, what kind of information do you be some filtering so that information that goes is not some myths about so get propagated or used for crowdfunding to see how do we use social media platform, but how do we use it for propagation of the right information?
To deal with a little bit of the instability of the
not able to hear anything.
No problems. So now, yes. there is a little bit of echo, but the other thing is, every disease, there are a lot of myths and facts. So myths are prevalent in the society. They are kind of over the years, decades, and centuries that are built up into the social fabric and are extremely, extremely difficult to change and modify. But at the same time, it is important that people need to be provided in an objective way of what are the facts, so that it's up to them to decide what is the myth and what is the fact. So, am I not clear? Dr. Shifali, I'll request you, if I am not clear, then you are...
Sir, you are clear. You are clear. Durgesh, can you, आपको नहीं सुनाई दे रहा तो can you log out and log in again? Can you log out and log in again? मैं what chat में लिख देती हूँ. Sir, आप continue करिए. It's audible, sir. You are audible. There's a problem at Durgesh's end. Yeah.
So the question is, and then there is a lot of issue about, sometimes reporting can be a little irresponsible, particularly when it is not done by professionals. I'm talking about the social media, because everyone tends to take up to Facebook and Twitter and whatever, and therefore the dissemination might be a little insensitive towards the needs and the feelings of people with these conditions. So the question is again to this. Can I again go back to to who would like to answer that? Mr. Rajan, and then perhaps Mr. Balakrishnan, that how can we make things more sensitive and at the same time very clearly and objectively trying to distinguish between myths and facts, and what is the best way of presenting it?
Sure. So, am I audible now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think, as you rightly said, given the evolving space, there is always this challenge of, what kind of information is being reached out to people, how is it being delivered in a very simplistic manner, so that the end goal of any communication exercise is awareness, education, and leading to particular action. Now, if people cannot act based on the information that is being provided, in general terms, that communication is an ineffective communication. So I think we have to look at how does the role of media, how does the role of corporates in kind of really driving awareness, leading to action for patients. When it comes to say myths versus facts, given the, rise of social media today, anybody and everybody is a content generator. Now, that is where the challenge comes in, that, what is being put up out there, how authentic is that, how can we filter that? So I think that is where, we will have to educate patients that, go to credible sources of information, because today we see a lot of WhatsApp forwards, etc., which is a source of information, but you and I cannot differentiate whether, it's coming from a credible source. I'll give an example that, when we were launching Registry, which is the SMA drug, we actively engaged with Dr. Shefali Gulati herself. And so there we know that the patient also knows that there's a credible voice who's coming and sharing facts. Otherwise, you can put up any kind of report and then you say that, this is how you need to act. People kind of go ahead and take a step. And unfortunately, we are also aware that there are many, repercussions that have happened on that. I think from another aspect, what we have to be also clear is how are we being sensitive when it comes to reporting myths, facts, as well as, in terms of highlighting these SMA cases, or rare condition cases. It should not be like always a situation where you're showing them as, people who are disadvantaged, etc. And there is a story of grit and determination as well. These are people who have, unfortunately, have a, genetic challenge, but, there are stories of hope. There are stories of, how they're fighting the situation. I think the role of media should also be to sort of play that up so that there is a lot of positive vibe that gets generated. Also, I think when you add myths and facts, we should also look at, can media play the role of raising awareness around adverse events? Because the challenges that these kind of conditions face is, one, it is rare, it is not talked about, And there are cases where, because the therapies also are new, there could be situations where there are adverse events happening. Now, how does the media play a role in terms of bringing that to mainline conversation so that improvement in overall treatment options happen? I think I would package, that view in some of these thoughts.
Yeah. So yes, very well said. And think building up a story is extremely important. Stories stick, as they say, and therefore I think that is something extremely important. Mr. Balkrishna, would you like to any thoughts about how we can media uh, can make things more sensitive? I think it applies more to the non-professional or the lay media or the social media, as I say, but still some thoughts about that.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Gagandeep. So the first thing is that, as we know, that rare diseases by definition are the diseases which affect only a small part of the society. So unfortunately, private media, I mean, except for Doordarshan or AIR, the government media, private media is unfortunately inclined towards catering to subjects which are of interest of a bigger section of the people. I mean, they basically want to produce something which have many consumers. So in this case, which is not the case. So that is the challenge. So how to find space, because in the private media, the newspaper, or even in digital space, people are vying for spaces and stories are being pushed around. So there is a push factor. So one thing that I feel could be done is that how to make the stories, these stories are this information, how could we make these stories interesting for the general society who are not affected? I mean, is it possible to make them so simple, so interesting, some case studies, some inspiring stories that could be also interest of the people who are not directly affected by these diseases? That is one thing that could be done. The second thing that, as you underlined, is it is very important that people get information, have access to credible information. Generally, we see that these people, families of these people often form a group, a WhatsApp group, and they keep on sharing something or the other they get from WhatsApp or somewhere. At times these informations are right, at times these information are not right. So is it possible that a panel of doctor or somebody who's an expert on this could be part of that group, so that they can guide them that this is not right and this is right? Is it possible that, I know that these doctors are also very strict, it is not possible for them to spare time for this, but is it possible that they hand out something like a question answer thing which could be circulated, which are credible information that we saw in case of COVID? So there was credible information being circulated, being issued by AIIMS. So people were sharing this and saying that this has been said by the AIIMS doctor, so this must be true. So is it something that could be possible? Can we simplify those jargons that many people do not understand? Is it possible to decipher this technical information into small question and answer format that can be circulated? So these are the things I feel could be we could do, and the idea is how to make this rare diseases information related to this, problems related to this, into stories which are of interest to the general society, not just to those families.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so I think that's an important point. We need to keep it simple. If I may add to that, we need to keep it short also. So short and sweet is always good, but if it becomes a very long discourse, then people start losing interest, and their attention span starts waning. So short, sweet, simple, easy to understand, as you said, is extremely important. So now let me ask another question. Let me float another question. And actually, I would probably start from Dr. Shefali, if it is okay with you. From your point of view, I mean, I'm asking you because you are not from the media, and but you frequently would perhaps interact with the media. So, in your mind, ethics are important, just like in the medical field, ethics are extremely important. And likewise, the media is also governed by a set of rules and regulations, but besides that, also a set of ethical guiding principles. And these are often just principles or facts or tenets which need to be followed, but they cannot be regulated and they cannot be enforced. So what in your mind, particularly with reference to these rare disorders, very quickly, are the important ethical issues? And then I think, because this is a question which is directed to the media, so after that I would request Kiran madam to, and then maybe Durgesh ji to kindly, tell us what their thoughts about this is, right?
Thank you, sir. The point is, sir, what we expect the media to, they sometimes raise a problem. I understand. And as Balakrishnan said that, they want more, more people to be, accepting that. I mean, they want more reach and all, so in that side. So I feel that the problems are sometimes raised and I mean, I have some ethical issues to it, and the problems I feel when they're raising a problem, they should also be considering a solution. I think that many times they are in haste to, generally in haste to publish something or show something that they will not get the complete information. And one is that completeness of information may not be there. And they sometimes, I don't know whether I can use that word, uh, maybe make it more attractive to the reader or viewer. I mean, I didn't want to use the word sensationalize. I mean, I thought that was too much. I meant that they wanted to make it more attractive. So some terminologies are used, which may not be good ethically, I feel, and because if suppose they are reporting a case which has an issue, so the way it is issued, it is made more attractive and appealing to more masses with the problem, and then they go on the, I mean, on the empathy mode and all that. So, and I feel another thing is when when this Zolgensma, this is the medication which is 16 crore thing, which we are actually giving to most of our patients by humanitarian access programs. से global access है, Novartis का उसके साथ जा रहा है, and few patients have been doing through crowdfunding. तो क्या होता है कि वो एक बच्चे का होता है तो उसको बहुत ज्यादा hype करते हैं. तो point is there is ethics to it that those patients, other patients who are not able to access it, तो अगर वो कुछ कर रहे हैं story, then they can use that story and even suggest something, have the professionals also on board कि क्या है, instead of just making it more, attractive to the people. इसका बताओ fallout क्या है. Why was one patient which came to me, sir, they came from Murisa, वो parents पूरी के वो temple के बाहर बैठ के वो 16 crore arrange करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं. Some of them trying to do, crowdfunding में few of my patients, they could reach to few lakhs, but 16 crores is too much amount of money. So the parents are just chasing. And when they are putting in the papers, many of them, or the media, many times they don't talk about the holistic multidisciplinary standard of care. वो तो भूल जाते हैं हम लोग, बच्चों को बार बार बता रहे हैं, those things are not there. DMT में जैसे स्टेरॉइड देना है और जो बाकी मल्टीडिसिप्लिनरी केयर है, वैक्सीनेशन वगैरह देना है फॉर द रेस्पिरेटरी डिजीजेस, जो सब नॉर्मल जो सब कर रहे हैं, those things are forgotten. So that is why I feel तो थोड़ा सा उसको व्यूअर के लिए attractive या क्या, I don't know what adjective to appeal करना या कुछ है, so that or maybe a better word would be so that it catches their eye. but that may be an appropriate word, so in that case वो भूल जाते हैं कि उसका भी after effect क्या होगा. मुझे कई बार लगता है many people are conscientious in reporting, many people just want to finish off a story which will have a good viewership kind of thing.
Thank you. किरण जी, आपको क्या लगता है कि इसमें ethics का क्या रोल है और क्या ethical principles होते हैं? Maybe we will learn from you from that.
Yeah, sir. Thank you. Ethical principles, what we have learned over the years and we were taught when we are studying are that one, if you are taking a story which is a bit sensitive, you are not supposed to reveal one, the identity of the patient, which can actually affect the entire life of the person and the family. So especially in the cases of young girls where certain diseases are taken as the taboo in the society, so society ka nazariya kya hoga, how will people behave and things like that, so that should be taken care of. And as Dr. Shefali rightly said that things should not be exaggerated when we are talking about the disease. either some treatment. There are certain treatments which are very costly, could be very good in some cases, but it cannot be a blanket thing for every patient. So we must focus on the treatments which are available and which are actually not out of the pockets of the patient when we talk about the treatment that has to go for long. And then secondly, we can also talk when we're taking the case study. So what are the feelings of the patients, the family, that has to be projected and shown to the patients in a very sensitive manner, so that the feelings of the patient and the family doesn't get hurt. And in fact, the basic idea is to show one, the challenges that the person is facing, or the way that person is overcoming the challenges, so that it becomes an inspiration for other people who are suffering from such diseases. And the support that is available for them, that could be helpful, and not giving the false information, or not giving the half information, because that is equally dangerous. Because when people are not aware of, about what is complete knowledge, so little knowledge is dangerous, as it is said. Then the myths, bursting the myths is equally important, because when there is a lot of information available on the social media, Google and such websites. So giving the right information in a simple and right way through the right platform is equally important, so that the myths are burst, so that the social taboos, they are able to get rid of. And secondly, the kind of environment that we are planning to create, or we are trying to create for such patients, is equally important, specifically their acceptance in the society, and the kind of environment where the persons who are suffering from genetic rare diseases, they can reach to their optimum potential, and they can also live their life in a good way, a better quality of life for them. And especially for that, the entire way we think about them, how the society accept them, and what kind of environment we provide them if they come out of their house. Say if a person is visually challenged, so we need to build a kind of structure where he can move independently. The person who are not able to walk, so now in the cinema halls and other places also, there are certain kind of infrastructure in the offices also that is being built, so that it helps and support them. So basic idea is to support them and understand their challenges and make their life simpler, and the output that we can get. So the person who is actually affected from certain disease should not feel that I'm left out of this and I'm of no use to the society. So there we need to motivate them, build up their confidence, and get the best out of them for themselves, their families, and the society. So here comes the role of the public broadcaster and the media overall, where we can sensitize people in a simpler way and not giving false and wrong information.
Thank you. These are some very deep and lovely thoughts, Kiran madam. Gesti, what are your thoughts about the
Kiranji has very well explained the role. She has actually very well explained. And Dr. Gulati also raised a very fair point, that how when we highlight the story of one person who may have been able to raise 16 crore rupees, or a phenomenal amount, for the treatment of a particular rare disease, it gives out hopes for others, while they do not, and they do undertake desperate measures to reach that level, reach that amount, without realizing the other things that they can do, or whether it is practically possible to just raise that amount or not. So one thing I would say is crowdfunding is a newer phenomenon, and many people are using different platforms for crowdfunding. And even what are the pitfalls of highlighting one case study, and people who are not able to raise funds through these platforms. It's a good knowledge coming from Dr. Gulati for us, and we'll certainly keep that in mind while writing about stories about crowdfunding that people do. And apart from that, I believe, as Kiranji was telling, that for this rare diseases and all that, it is better if we highlight more stories about simpler things that can be done. For example, making places public places disabled friendly, making sure the child or person suffering from rare disease is they are vulnerable to many other diseases also, normal infections, heart related complications and all that. So it's important to highlight those problems and how to diagnose it timely, how to make timely diagnosis, what kind of care should we take about those things that can be easily managed, instead of highlighting one sensational thing about a person having crowdfunded huge amounts of money, because not everyone can do it, but everyone can help in making lives better for people suffering from rare disease by making public spaces more disabled friendly, or by ensuring that people empathize or are like you know out to help people who suffer from rare disease and try to understand how they feel, how to make them more comfortable. So I think those are the things that need to be highlighted, and I agree with Dr. Gulati on that.
Thank you. And just to take it a little bit forward, and maybe perhaps Mr. Balakrishnan can enlighten us on this, is are there any special laws or regulations? I mean, these are ethics. We've been talking about ethics. Ethics, as I said, is they are basically guiding principles. But I mean, are there any laws or regulations regarding what can be reported, what should not be reported, what the way it is supposed to be reported? So are there any legal statutes regarding that?
Dr. Gagandeep, as far as I know, there are no rules which govern this. There are no rules in black and white. There are some guidelines that varies from organization to organization. As Kiran was saying, that generally ethics is something what we should be keeping in mind when they report on a sensitive subject like this. I mean, it is on a case-to-case basis. We should be deciding that is it all right to disclose the identity of this person, or is it all right to use the photograph of the person or the family? They may not be comfortable to be photographed or the photographs being used. So should we do that? If we do that, should we have a clear-cut consent that we want to use this part of what you said, and we want to use this photograph? Can we use this? These are the things which are basically ethical, and this varies, and this also varies from organization to organization. Dr. Shefali was hesitant to say that word sensational, but I would admit that that is a correct thing. That is the right thing. I mean, there is no doubt that media needs to be more sensitive in reporting cases like this. But the challenge is, as a journalist, I feel that when you write a story, when any journalist writes a story or does a video or does a story for a digital space, one thing that is lingering on his mind or her mind is that, are enough people going to read my stories? You do not want to write stories only for a couple of people or just for the small group of people. So what is that one element that is going to attract people to read my story? That is one challenge that everybody faces, and that is why some people fall for those, I would say that cheap practices to sensationalize something. That happens. I won't say that is not happening. That happens once in a while. How can we overcome this? I think that Durgesh should know. He is full-time into health reporting. So only thing that I have also done health reporting earlier in my career. So one thing that could be is possible that if you talk to the doctor or talk to the families or talk to the doctor who's treating them, and you get to know different aspects of it, so then probably you can figure out, okay, this is something which I should highlight. This is not going to hurt the patient or the family, but still it is going to be of wider interest. So that needs the reporter or the journalist needs to put that extra work and that extra time to work on story, so that they can find out the angle which is interesting for the general society, for the general public, and still it is sensitive.
Thank you. Now, this is again, it's a question, and we would be learning more. I mean, it's about which the media person can answer, and I would request Kiran Madam and then Durgesh and Mr. Balakrishnan to answer this. What do you think is the level of awareness about rare disorders?
Dr. Singh, if sorry, before you go to the next one, I just wanted to add a point on this,
please.
on the laws part. So one part is, while it is not governing the media, we have something called as the Drugs and Magic Remedies Act, right? So, forms of advertising, forms of, storytelling, etc., also are governed by those. So I think, while it is not maybe directly towards a media perspective, companies and everybody who is responsible for driving awareness should also be kind of cognizant of the fact that what you're communicating, because many times you hear about words like cure, you hear words like this will kind of treat and change your life from tomorrow. I think everybody in this ecosystem has to be responsible. The media has a role. When an advertisement is coming in a paper, who is scanning that what is being communicated is right. As a corporate, I have a role that I should be communicating which is absolutely factual and authentic, and does not kind of use the gray elements of the Drugs and Magic Remedies Act sort of get across the point. So I think there is a moral responsibility that we have when it comes to adhering to certain specific laws. Just want to make that point.
I think what you've said is very important and completely agree with it. I mean, just for a case in instance, and without pointing any fingers, but for instance, the role of stem cells in so many disorders has been really over sensationalized. So that is something which, because people have to pay, and when people have to pay and their expectations and hopes are raised, so that becomes it becomes a big ethical issue. And then in the end, when there is disappointment that it did not work, so I think these are some of the really sensitive issues, and false claims. Google is just full of such wayward claims which can but it serves to influence people, and people go and follow them, and then eventually get disappointed and frustrated. But that's unfortunately the story. But then coming back to this important issue about what is your perception? And this is actually directed to all the media person. What is your perception about what is the level of awareness amongst the public about, let's say, a rare disorder like SMA? What do you guess? What do you think? How many people would actually know about it? Because if we know that this is the baseline level, or this is what people know, and this is how many people know, and our target is this much. Only then we can make targets. So Kiran, madam, any thoughts about that?
Yeah, Dr.
Kiran ma'am, you kindly unmute yourself.
अभी भी नहीं हुआ.
Am I audible now? Hello?
Yeah. अभी फिर गए.
Hello? Am I audible?
अभी ठीक.
Okay. So earlier, when we used to, some years back, when we used to do the programs, because we are running a live phone-in show, the kind of questions that we used to get, for certain these kind of diseases, if we talk about certain severe diseases or the genetic diseases, the people who used to call us, the questions would be, मेरे दोस्त के family में ऐसा problem है, or so and so in my known circle has such problem. तो उससे क्या करना चाहिए? But now the kind of questions we get are that my son, my daughter, or there is a such problem in my family. So what should be the solution? Because we have the expert of panelists in our program. So certainly the level of awareness is definitely increasing. But yes, we need to work a lot on that, because in the earlier films also we have many times see. If we talk about a simple procedure of blood transfusion, there were some Bollywood movies which used to show, that a patient is lying down on a single bed, and there are 3 other people who are just lying besides the patient, and they are giving their blood. It goes to one bottle, and then it is being transferred to the patient. So definitely the kind of work that media is doing and has been doing for years, now the patients and the people are more aware about such diseases. But yes, as it was mentioned earlier in the talk, that the information that is available on the internet and on social media, there should be some kind of check on that, or the information through the right media should be there, so that the people know what is right and what is not. Because there is a very thin line. If a patient listens or hears and sees the information on the social media, he'll go to the doctor. It becomes the entire work of the doctor also very challenging. When the patient is consulting a doctor, he's taking his own remedies because he has heard it from somewhere or read it somewhere, and then comes with the severe case to the doctor. They're coming in the emergencies कि हमने ये medicine ले ली थी यहाँ पर पढ़ के, या ये procedure था. So these kind of incidents can be controlled. And secondly, if we talk about the awareness level, patients do ask their questions. The acceptance of the family and such people who are affected with the genetic disorders and rare diseases are increasing in the society. We are working. There are some programs that is run through the government also. The top programs, if we talk about, there have been the programs in which they are supporting the patients. So such program, what support is there, and what are the facilities that a person can avail? We generally from time to time keep on giving such information on the public media platform, being a public broadcaster. But yes, definitely lot more efforts need to be done in this field.
Thank you. Durgeshi, any thoughts about what is the level?
Yeah. So I personally feel the awareness levels are really low. Not many people, except those in, like, who have family members suffering from the disease, really know about the specifics of the rare disease. There is a general increase in like awareness that, okay, these are rare diseases. The treatment cost is very high. Some of them are caused due to genetic disorders. Some of them are related to consanguineous marriages and all that. But this is a general information. People don't know about specific rare diseases, or how to treat them, how to manage them, who suffers from them. That awareness level needs to really, really go up.
Yeah.
And not just among the general public, but even among the policy makers or like media people everywhere. Like the knowledge about rare disease has to go up. It's not sufficient right now, I would say.
Yeah, I think we all completely agree with you. But someone who doesn't agree might say that you're actually missing the forest while trying to look at the trees. So that is the only thing. But yes, I think at least in this panel we all agree with you. Yes.
Add small perspective there. Though not from the media side, but having launched an SMA drug in India roughly a year back, and August happens to be the SMA awareness month. We had first-hand information of different stakeholders and their level of understanding. I would say except for in specific pockets, like if you talk about the doctor audience, which is kind of dealing with the condition, or with say patient support groups who are handling it, in general the awareness levels are extremely low. Now talk about say awareness levels at governments, right? I think it is not maybe fair to expect that everybody will understand it at a particular degree, but I think there is a long way to go in terms of how do you really build in awareness. I also believe that the degree of awareness does not have to be uniform across the board, right? And not everybody can understand every subject at the same degree of. But I think what is important for us to understand is what is the level of information an audience group needs, and how can we make that happen. I'll give an example that, for example, in the case of SMA, we know that early detection can save life, especially in type 1. Now, what happens is, that is where I think the awareness for a parent that, what kind of symptoms can lead to questions in their mind. Second, for the pediatricians themselves, and I know, in fact, we have tried to find out, even awareness at the general pediatricians level for SMA is slightly low. And the action happens only after 6-8 months of the child's birth. So how do you kind of really work on those specific pockets and say what is the level of awareness that you need for each audience group, so that awareness translates into some kind of action end of the day, the goal is to benefit the patient. I think that's broadly how I would look at this entire challenge of lack of awareness and what can be solved.
Thank you, Mr. Rajan. So as we approach the end of this session and it's time to conclude, so I would request all the panelists, but let it be very short and sweet. But one, what is your take on what really needs to be done in terms of awareness, and how would you like to see it be done? And I would like to begin with Dr. Gulati, and then in that order to Mr. Rajan, Kiran Madam, Durgesh, and Balakrishna.
Sir, I think it should be sensitive and complete reporting after researching the thing and flag the issue, but also point the solutions. You have to, when you're making the story should not be only ki this is a problem, but this is the problem and this is a solution. So get the experts there. And why are you always in haste? The story ja rahi hai, 7 baje ja rahi hai, 10 baje. I mean, why can't it be planned? I don't understand. Then in haste, you're asking professionals also, So I just think, why can't we just slow down a bit? Is it, I don't know, that there is a thing. Otherwise, I think we make a lot of difference. And somebody has written a question, isme abhi, ki, how can they approach the media that they have awareness months and all? So, I mean, that is...
Yes. There are questions also, and we probably need to address these. So this is actually an important question, and if anyone would like to cover it in their last and final message for this session, is what do, as parents, what we can do to increase awareness or create. So that is something which is extremely important and relevant. I mean, as parents, as family members, or as groups which are looking after these diseases, what can be done? So if anyone, again, starting from Dr. Gulati, would like to address this and your final take on this. And that's extremely important, I think so.
Yeah, sir, parents have to be also involved, sir. I mean, when they are saying, and they are also going to understand. And I think parent support groups have to be there to help them, each other understand. They should feel they're not alone and they can help each other in their, needs. That's why we had one panel earlier, and on Monday we have 2 NGO panels of DMD SMA separately. So they have to work together and not against also, because I have seen many of the parents are, in their struggle to raise the money, they are sometimes not working together. They are separately, they're working. So I think they should understand and pair up with their fellow parents, and you should take the information from the reliable doctor sources also. And it's just not that Google is your answer, and that is something very clear. And I think media can help them. Messages can be go with the proper thing. I think Durgesh also does that, and 20 years to career from Kiran. I mean, so I think that can be done. And they're putting on YouTube, sir. So usse widespread viewership hai. Pehle YouTube mein nahi hota tha, jisne dekha nahi to ek rerun hota tha. I think that's important.
Kiran madam, your
yes,
final take on
Dr.
this.
Gagandeep. Right. Am I audible, Dr. Gagandeep?
Yes.
Yeah. So awareness is the greatest agent for change. So we just need to focus on awareness of the patient, awareness of the family, the society, in fact, the school staff, as you mentioned in the talk, and especially the policymakers also. We have an example of we were able to eradicate polio from the country in 2014. That is just because, the diseases like smallpox, that was only possible because of the vaccination drive and, of course, the awareness campaigns that were run through the media. So, in fact, even if we talk about the rare diseases, genetic disorders, the similar kind of approach need to be there as we do the program. And Dr. Shefali said that once the program or the story is done, it is also available on the YouTube, social media, Facebook, Twitter. The links are available there. So the people who have missed the opportunity to watch the talk or the program or such story can go back to the that platform and watch it. So hammering the basic messages Because as and when we repeatedly see the visuals, like when we go in the auditoriums to watch in the theaters to watch the film, there is this promo of harmful effects of tobacco that is run between the movies also and before the movie starts. So it has a great impact. So if we need to change the psyche, the vision, and the way people think, we need to hammer the important messages day in and out. We need to hammer it again and again to bring the awareness, and definitely the change will come. But for that, the continuous efforts, the sincere efforts have to be made. And along with that, the only point that we have to be aware about and we should be taking care of is that the stoppage of wrong information or misleading information should also be taken care of, because and sometimes even spoil the momentum of the information that we are giving. So that should the checks should be there. And of course it is a teamwork. So media has been, in fact, in the COVID times also, the vaccination drive of COVID, or what kind of principles and steps should we follow to contain the spread of infections. We have seen people wearing the mask, sanitizing their hands. So even if such practice can come in our day-to-day life, we can definitely change the viewpoint and the kind of environment that we provide to the patient, family, and the entire vision of society will change. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think what I liked is repeatedly hammering, so I think, any campaign has to be sustained and it has to go on for some time. Only then it can really bring about the change it is intended to. Durgesh ji, your final message, and especially to the government, what would you like to say to the government and policymakers?
First, from the question that was raised, how can parents raise awareness about rare diseases? So one of the things that could be done is share success stories, how they have been managing their family member, like somebody who has been managing well, what is happening. If they share success stories, that will bring some kind of give some kind of encouragement to other people who are suffering from a similar problem, who has a newly diagnosed patient, and they can learn or get some encouragement from that. Secondly, from the government point of view, government should stop treating rare diseases and the cost involved as something that we cannot touch it, because in that much of amount we can save so many lives, like being lost due to diarrhea, tuberculosis, and other diseases are very important. The non-infectious, the infectious disease that we have been seeing for the last many years are very important. But rare diseases should also be given the importance it deserves. Even if one child, two child, or 2,000 children are dying or suffering because of a disease that needs attention, and we know from the cost involved in the treatment of rare disease that no individual can actually afford the treatment. So the government needs to channelize the focus on, research to reduce the cost of treatment, to find ways that, treatment can be provided easily. So all these things need to be done from the government's point of view to make things better for people suffering from rare disease and for future, things.
So I think you mentioned research advocacy, and advocacy is important, but research advocacy itself is also, government needs to raise funds, increase the amount of funding for this. So that is something that the media can actually take up and, and can be very influential in. Mr. Balkrishnan, your final.
So I would just like to extend what Durgesh said, is that there is a huge gap right now between what is needed and in awareness level, what is needed and what needs to be done. And also the fact that because of lack of information, many people fall for social media. They grab on whatever they get in social media, and that is not always right. Also the fact that you talked about research. So also the fact that India is such a huge country. I'm pretty sure that there would be thousands of cases in India of DMD and other rare genetic diseases. They have never been diagnosed properly. They do not know that their kids have got DMD or any rare diseases, genetic diseases. because they never got an opportunity to see a really qualified doctor who could do a proper diagnosis. So as a result, when the policymakers are also not aware, these people exist in the society, but they are living in the situation of hopelessness. And if there is no data, there is these people are never on record. Part of their disease are never on record. So even for the research purposes, even for the institutes who are doing some research, are trying to find out what can be done about them, they are also in dark. So awareness level definitely needs to be increased, both within the society and also for the people who are in the power, in the position of power, so they can do something about this.
Yes. The point that you raised about yeah, of course, the research advocacy is extremely important. Mr. Rajan, your last comments, what are your final comments? And after that, we will stop here.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Singh. So I think two parts. One was, I think you're talking about how parents can, really, learn that. I think, in other therapy areas like cancer, etc., there is already a very evolved ecosystem, which is something of patients like me. I think there is a lot of learning that happens through, talking, understanding what other people have gone through, and how they have kind of overcome the challenges. I think in the rare disease space, there's an opportunity to sort of start building that kind of an ecosystem where people learn, because it's all about management of the disease over a long-term period, right? And especially in the case of rare disease, to be honest, there is nothing called as a cure immediately, right? It's all about managing the situation. So how does one learn from somebody else who has managed? And I think Durgesh touched upon that. So I think that's an area which could evolve, especially in the Indian context, and I think that's where patients will greatly benefit. In terms of your larger question on role of awareness, I think awareness is the first steps towards action. So I think when we talk about, say, for us as corporates, our focus is around driving awareness, with HCPs on various clinical protocols, where is the science headed. With patients and patient support groups, we talk about awareness at a basic level of how do you manage disease, so on and so forth. And with government, I think our focus is more on policy advocacy, in terms of we had a great start with respect to rare disease with the policy that came out. I think various industry bodies came together to help the government kind of formulate a policy. Now the next step is the elephant in the room, as I call, is funding. In healthcare, what happens is you may have a screening, you may detect a disease, but the worst part is after knowing it, you don't give a solution. So today, if drugs are coming to the market, how the next step is, how do we kind of make a sustainable access program? How do we ensure that access is sustainable for patients? So I think we all know that funding challenges with respect to rare conditions, etc. So I think we need to kind of look at awareness from a multiple lens, because again, it's different for different people, and only then will an action happen.
Yeah, that's extremely important, and there is a very good solution provided by Bharat MD Foundation, right? You can motivate 10 crore people to spare 1,000 rupees once, you would get a huge corpus. This could be one of the solutions here. But getting people to do it is really difficult. But yes, this is something that really needs to be done, and it requires passionate people. It requires motivated people, like some of our panelists and the attendees here. It's been for me a tremendous opportunity to listen to your views. I can certainly say I'm much wiser than what I was maybe about 1.5 hours back, and one and a half hours is a very short time for this. But all credit to the panelists, special credit to the organizers, and special credit to Dr. Shefali Gulati, who is a world leader. I have no hesitation to say that her initiatives, the drive that she has, the passion that she has, completely hats off to you. So thank you, Dr. Shefali. Thank you. Personally, I would like to thank you for asking me. It's time well spent for me, time well spent learning something very important and being in the midst of such special people. So thank you so much. And if you, is it okay? Can I conclude here this particular session?
Yeah, yes, sir. Thank you so much for your kind words and encouragement blessings. I thank all the panelists and especially you. And sir, we'll just Dr. Kakri will put the poll questions, which will take 2 minutes. You posted it?
Yeah.
It's already
We have
posted.
already posted
It. Yeah. So then, and so then she'll just do the thanks housekeeping remarks.
Thank you all the panelists and the participants for joining this session. It was really very important. The awareness is not just for the families who are affected, but it is also very important for the other people in the society, the community. And the humanistic approach by each and every person and the community society should be there so that society is more friendly, and so has the any special child can move towards independence and is very happy uh, being accepted in the society. And definitely, as all the panelists had been very rightly pointing out, the right message should be available to all. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Please join us on Monday at 10 o'clock. The first session is going to be of NGOs from India and abroad on SMA and second on DMD. Thank you so much. So we have 8 more sessions to go. Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday, and we finish on 3rd. Thank you so much.